Chapter 627. Little Silver was pure silver, a silver that was free from vulgar tastes. The moment he saw this rope-like lingerie, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal didn't know how to explain it for a moment, or rather, he was thinking about how to explain it in a way that wouldn't seem so vulgar. Little Silver hadn't been out in the world for long, and actually didn't know a lot about the ways of the world. Since Brotherling had placed Little Silver with Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, it had to be because he trusted Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal 100%. Given Brotherling's level of expert, he couldn't possibly have left Little Silver with Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal because he was sure of money, right? Although there were a lot of old drivers in the chat group who would make jokes from time to time, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had immediately made an announcement in the group banning any uncivilized chatting after Little Silver had joined. In the end, it was because he didn't want Little Silver to be led astray by Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Since Brother Ling trusts me so much, I have to take good care of Little Silver. Thinking this, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal nodded solemnly. But Little Silver wasn't the kind of player who could be easily fooled. Because he wasn't clear on a lot of things, he tended to be very stubborn when it came to understanding things, and had to find an answer that he agreed with. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal knew that if he couldn't come up with a reasonable explanation now, Little Silver would find out through other channels. Grenade-throwing, what on earth is this? Why do you look so strange? Little Silver asked suspiciously when he realized that Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was staring at the pink rope with his chin in his hands, lost in deep thought. Oh, it's nothing. I was just wondering if you like this color. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was quick-witted and didn't arouse Little Silver's suspicions. Pink, it's okay. Some people online say that pink is very girly, but I like it very much. Everyone is free to like whatever color they like, Little Silver answered quickly. In fact, Little Silver wasn't prejudiced against pink in terms of color. As for the online theory that pink was a sissy, he actually didn't quite understand it. Little Silver's attitude toward pink was neutral. He could use it at home, but he would never take it out. Hearing Little Silver's words, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal instantly breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Little Silver with a smile and pointed to the pink lingerie. Actually, this is a headband. Hairband. That's right, headband. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said, when you wash your face, you can tie it around your forehead to prevent your hair from getting wet. Of course, it can also absorb sweat during exercise. Is that really the case? Little Silver stared at this pink headband and frowned because somehow he felt that Grenade-throwing's expression was a little different and a little strange. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal tried his best to look as natural as possible. That's right, it's a headband. Fine. In any case, I can only use this thing at home. I can't take it out. Little Silver pursed his lips. Soon after, he looked at the lubricant, candle, and leather whip gloomily. He really didn't understand why the hairband was sent with these three things. After receiving the package, Little Silver went to wash his face and put on a facial mask. This was a habit that Little Silver had developed recently. Everyone needed to take care of themselves, and Little Silver was naturally no exception. He had actually learned how to put on a facial mask from Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, and even the facial mask he used was Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's. But a cultivator's cleansing facial mask was different from an ordinary one. This was a genuine cosmetic mask that had liposuction, water gloss, and a remodeling effect. After it was put on, the whole face would be as white as an egg, and the worse the skin, the better the effect. After one was put on, the effect would last for a month. In fact, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal didn't think there was any need for Little Silver to put it on, because this guy's face was already very white. When Little Silver had visited the Wong family's small villa back then, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal knew that Little Silver had been given the nickname Fair-Faced Girl by Mother Wong. As a holy beast, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal felt that Little Silver was actually quite particular about his appearance. Because of the facial mask, that pink-red headband from before just happened to come in handy. When Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal saw this scene, his entire expression was a little off. Then he saw Little Silver lean back on the sofa and turn on his phone, as if he was making a video call with someone. The corners of his mouth twitched. Brother Silver, what are you doing, little Silver? I'm going to make a call with Dog 2. It's looking for me and says that Master has an important combat mission for me. Grenade-throwing senior immortal. Isn't it inappropriate for you to look for it with a facial mask on? Little Silver, it's nothing, we're family. This Dog 2 can't take human form yet. If I put a facial mask on in front of it, it'll be so envious. Grenade-throwing senior immortal. It always shows off in front of me. This time, I finally caught a chance. Little Silver patted the facial mask and did his best to make it as even and flat as possible without leaving any air bubbles. Grenade-throwing senior immortal now really hoped that Brother Dog didn't know too much. The ringing lasted for about a minute before Loopy Toad accepted the video chat mode that Little Silver had sent. Very quickly, the video was sent over. With one glance, Loopy Toad saw that Little Silver was putting on a facial mask, and, judging from his smug expression, this guy was obviously doing it on purpose. The corners of Loopy Toad's mouth twitched, and its keen eyes then caught sight of the pink headband on Little Silver's forehead. Loopy Toad was startled on the spot. Little Silver, that headband on your forehead is quite unique. Little Silver, of course, it's a freebie I got when I bought a magic artifact. The color is average, but it's really silky smooth, and for some reason when I tied it on my head, I really wanted to be touched. Now, Grenade-throwing senior immortal really wanted to find a hole to crawl into. Loopy Toad, didn't grenade-throwing tell you what it is? Little Silver, grenade-throwing said it's a headband. Loopy Toad, a headband? Loopy Toad clearly knew that Little Silver had most likely been deceived, but it couldn't bear to expose the lie. On the contrary, it could quite understand Grenade-throwing senior immortal's good intentions. Thus, even if it knew what on earth this pink headband was, Loopy Toad still did its best to smile in front of the video chat. Your headband looks pretty good, Little Silver. At least you know what's good. Are you jealous? Do you want me to order another one that's the same as a dime for you? Oh, the corners of Loopy Toad's mouth twitched. Better not. It didn't have the habit of putting underwear on its head. Loopy Toad, but I'll have to trouble you to tell Grenade-throwing, Little Silver. What do you want to say? My speaker is on. He's right next to me. Loopy Toad, I want to ask him, he went through 9 years of compulsory education. Why is he so outstanding? Chapter 628. It was very obvious that Little Silver had been duped. As for why Dog 2 knew about this kind of thing, it was a long story because the phone Loopy Toad was using now was Father Wong's leftover one, and when it had been given to Loopy Toad, its online shopping account hadn't been completely logged in yet. Loopy Toad remembered that it had inadvertently opened it and happened to see something like that in the historical record at that time. This was actually a lot of information. At the time, Loopy Toad had stared at the screen in shock for a long time, then pretended not to see it and logged out of the account. Loopy Toad felt that it knew more about the ways of the world than Little Silver. If it had treated this as a joke back then, it would definitely have been kicked out of the family by Father Wong. After all, it hadn't been long since it had arrived at the Wong family's small villa. Thus, there were many times when it was appropriate to turn a blind eye and pretend that it hadn't seen anything was the right thing to do. As it turned out, Loopy Toad's decision at the time had been quite accurate. After all, not everyone's legs were as thick as Little Masterling's. Dog 2 thought for a while, and in the end decided not to tell Little Silver about this hairband. There were times when a white lie was necessary. So after careful consideration, Loopy Toad said to Little Silver, "Your hairband looks really good." It was a lie, but the truth was that Little Silver was rarely envied. As Wong Ling's contract beast, Little Silver would naturally compare himself to Loopy Toad. So every time he heard Loopy Toad mention Wong Ling taking it out for a walk, Little Silver would be extremely envious. Now that there was finally something that Dog 2 was envious of, Little Silver was very happy. In front of the video call, Little Silver had a smug expression on his face. "If you want it, just tell me. Don't be polite. I'll buy you a box later and send it over." Loopy Toad, buy a box. Loopy Toad was blank. Buy a box for what? To change into something else? Loopy Toad clearly didn't want to continue on this topic, so it hurriedly changed the subject and spoke telepathically to Little Silver instead. Soundless voice transmission wasn't a complicated spell. After many improvements, the current soundless voice transmission spell could be perfectly integrated with modern technology. For example, the spell that Buttface was using now was the face-to-face soundless voice transmission spell. This was a type of soundless voice transmission spell that was specially designed for video calls. Sound transmission spells were always the same. Many branches were designed according to the basic sound transmission spell formula. So as long as one knew the basic sound transmission spell, it was not difficult to learn other types of sound transmission spells. However, the structure of the Heaven's Path sound transmission technique was completely different from the basic sound transmission technique. Loopy Toad remembered that Little Master Ling had once mentioned the Heavenly Tao's great telepathy spell. As long as Wang Ling wanted to, his voice could reach the hearts of everyone on Earth at the same time. This kind of method was too heaven-defying, and it was far from the level that they could reach. So every time Dog 2 used the telepathic technique, it would wonder when it could be as outstanding as Little Master Ling. So many cultivators had lumbar discs, but its Little Master was the only one who stood out so much that it made one's scalp go numb. Face-to-face voice transmission? Seeing this scene, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal tactfully turned around and went about his own business. If he chose to use the face-to-face voice transmission technique, that would mean that these two contract beasts were going to whisper to each other, and it would be inconvenient for him to listen in. Since that was the case, he naturally wouldn't ask for a snub. Furthermore, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal didn't think that this was bad. Although Little Silver and Dog 2 bickered from time to time, this was another manifestation of their close relationship. Now that the two of them had learned to whisper to each other, this scene gave off a warm, brotherly vibe. In the end, it's Brother Ling. He's so considerate. Looking at this scene now, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal couldn't help sighing with emotion in his heart. No wonder so many people had responded to the two-child plan now. Having one more contract beast made a difference. With two contract beasts as companions, you definitely wouldn't feel lonely. On the other side, Little Silver felt a little strange about Loopy Toad's telepathic technique. When did I use the face-to-face voice transmission technique? Can't Grenade-throwing know about this? Loopy Toad replied, "It's dangerous for Senior Immortal to know about this. Our little master thought about it before concealing it." Although Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had this soul suppression ring, which could resurrect people on the spot, it wasn't invincible and had its own limitations. After Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had died at Evil Sword God's hands, he had carefully read the soul suppression ring's description when he got back. Unlimited resurrection was one of its abilities. As long as the ring was intact, the body could be reconstructed. However, there was a label inside that he hadn't noticed before, and that was the word energy source. It was very clear in the Soul Suppression Ring's manual that the Soul Suppression Ring could only resurrect targets who had been fatally injured by a spirit energy spell. That was to say, if the enemy you faced used primordial chi as an energy source, the Soul Suppression Ring would be useless. Hence, Wang Ling had never intended to involve Grenade-throwing in this matter from the very beginning. The three-view-shattering hammer was actually a long story, because it had to start with the Kuan corpse that Demon Saint and Sage Master Shenwuyue had defeated in the Holy Palace of the Demon World. Little Silver was stupefied when he heard this. He had no idea that Loopy Toad had such an adventure. "So, you're now being mistaken for a big shot?" Little Silver was startled, but that didn't seem to be the main point right now. What had he heard? A prehistoric, vicious beast. And a baby Kuan at that. Little Silver couldn't help clicking his tongue, and he said in a tone as if he had foreseen this, "There's actually a prehistoric, vicious beast alive? Did you sense it?" Loopy Toad suddenly asked. "Yes, but I didn't dare confirm it before. There's actually a slight telepathic connection between holy beasts and vicious beasts," Little Silver replied. Little Silver replied, "When I was hiding in Immortal Mansion before, I vaguely sensed something, but I thought it was an illusion at the time. So it's possible that the angler you mentioned released a vicious beast on Earth." Dog 2's fur trembled at these words. It suddenly understood a little why Little Master was so eager to forge this spirit hammer. It was very likely that after Little Masterling had noticed the angler through this incident, he had already sensed that the angler had extended his hand to Earth. Although it wasn't clear what the other party's objective was, what was certain was that Immortal Genuine's life was indeed in danger. How about it? Do you want to come with me? I'll help that senior deliver the hammer that Little Master made for him, Loopy Toad said as it looked at Little Silver after it calmed down. Of course. This is Master's first mission. I definitely have to do a good job. Little Silver tore off the mask on his face and stood up excitedly. Actually, he was a little selfish. Chapter 629. In fact, all these years, Little Silver had always fantasized that holy beasts hadn't truly gone extinct. Apart from himself, it would be good if there was still one living holy beast. But all these years, human cultivators hadn't been able to find the whereabouts of the holy beasts, even though they had used all kinds of advanced scientific magic treasures to explore the area. Little Silver had thought that his dream had been shattered, but now that he heard about anglers and prehistoric vicious beasts, he suddenly saw a glimmer of hope. There had been news before about a plane whose signal had suddenly disappeared in the middle of a flight, and it had directly vanished from the face of the earth for 10 years. In the end, 100 years later, this group of people who had been regarded as dead at the time appeared on a mysterious island and established stone village. So, maybe a miracle really could happen. Grenade throwing, grenade throwing. I'm going out. I'm going to Master's place. After confirming with Loopy Toad that they were on the move, Little Silver planned to set off right away. He also reported it to Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Little Silver originally wasn't in the habit of doing this. Sometimes he really had to believe in metaphysics. Judging from his 3 previous visits to the police station, as long as he went out alone, he would definitely end up in the police station. So now, Little Silver didn't dare act recklessly. It was safer to find someone to go with him. On the other side, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal let go of the mouse in his hand and looked at him. Okay, Brother Silver, I'll drive you there. In fact, it was Grenade-throwing himself who had asked for someone to accompany Little Silver when he went out. Although Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had acquaintances at the police station, he still had to go through the basic bail procedures. Who could stand being arrested the first time he went out? Thus, it was better to avoid trouble. Although it would take some time to drive Little Silver to Brotherling's place, it was still a lot better than wasting time at the police station later. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal put down his work and prepared to drive the car. Only then did Little Silver remember that this was his first time sitting in Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's car. Grenade-throwing. What car are you driving? Little Silver couldn't help asking. A Huawei triplex spirit car, water, land, and air. It's super fast. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal grinned. I remember there's a brand called Lenovo. No need. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal quickly waved his hand. This is a traitor. Little Silver raised his eyebrows. Although Grenade-throwing painting played it down, Little Silver could feel that he was full of righteousness and a sense of justice. Suddenly, Little Silver seemed to understand a little why Master wanted him to stay at Grenade-throwing's house. Was this a hint that she should learn more from Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal? Little Silver felt that this was the only explanation that made no sense. What kind of person was Master? He wouldn't throw himself here just to save money. Yes, that must be it. Just as Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was about to go to the garage to get the car, Little Silver suddenly shouted, Grenade-throwing! Grenade-throwing! Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Is there anything else, Brother Silver? Little Silver. Can I stay here forever? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal smiled slightly. Of course, Brother Silver can treat this place as your own home. Little Silver. Grenade-throwing. Grenade-throwing. When I come back from a mission, can I not order takeout and eat broccoli? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was startled. Brother Silver, you're willing to eat broccoli? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's impression was that Little Silver had always been extremely averse to vegetables. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was unexpectedly caught off guard by this sudden change in attitude. Brother Silver, I just suddenly wanted to eat it, can't I? Why not? If Brother Silver wants to eat broccoli, you can have as much as you want. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was a little excited, as if he had found a kindred spirit. All right, then it's a deal. When I'm done with the mission, I'll come back to eat it. Little Silver was overjoyed. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Although Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was very happy, why did he feel that Little Silver had raised a very strange flag? It was like those TV dramas where a general going to war would say to his fiancée, "When the war is over, I'll come and marry you." Then the two of them went to the garage next to the villa. Little Silver saw Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal stand at the garage door for a few seconds before the tightly shut door opened automatically. This garage was powered by a facial recognition system. Then, an exquisite tricycle SUV appeared in front of Little Silver. This SUV was dark gold and covered in thick armor. It looked very cumbersome, but was in fact very light, much lighter than most supercars on the market. This was Little Silver's first time seeing Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's car, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. A spirit car was very different from a regular car, in that it was identified by a spirit sword instead of car key. All spirit cars bought by cultivators would be bound to the cultivator's sword in the exclusive shop. How do I start it? Little Silver asked. He had never seen these things before and lacked knowledge about the spirit cars used by modern cultivators. It's very simple. First, you have to take out the bound spirit sword. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal summoned his brilliant victory sword, then opened the lid on the back of the car, which looked like a fuel tank, and stuck the sword in together with its scabbard. With a roar of the engine, the car started smoothly. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Brother Silver, don't just stand there. Get in. Little Silver, on a sword, it would take 2 hours to travel from one Xian garden to the Wang family's small villa. It would take 2 hours in total, but it would actually be faster to travel by car. That was because there was an aerial bridge in the sky, specially designed for vehicles to travel on, and a sword user couldn't travel on it. They had to drive. But for the sake of convenience, cultivators nowadays usually left their cars at home to collect dust unless they were going to some important occasion. It was still a little more convenient to travel with just one sword. It took no more than 3 minutes for the car to slowly rise into the air and drive steadily in the direction of the Wang family's small villa on the bridge. Little Silver looked around curiously. This was the first time he had seen such a modern aerial bridge. But after 5 or 6 minutes of driving, Little Silver suddenly frowned. He turned his gaze to a layer of clouds. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal sensed Little Silver's abnormality. Brother Silver, what's wrong? There seems to be killing intent. Little Silver grit his teeth as he stared at the layers of clouds. Little Silver was almost naturally sensitive to this kind of malicious aura. There was absolutely no mistaking it. This was a malicious, murderous aura. Moreover, this smell was somewhat familiar. Who is it? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal gripped the steering wheel tightly as he became more vigilant. At that moment, Little Silver's eyes darkened. Although he couldn't be 100% sure, this aura was very similar to the killing intent on that Mr. Liu from before. Chapter 630. A murderous aura seeped through the clouds to the side. After Little Silver's alert, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal also sensed the faint murderous aura in the clouds. Although the other party had hidden very well, Little Silver still sensed it. A holy beast perception was extraordinary and much sharper than that of a cultivator's. Furthermore, Little Silver was very certain that the other party was from the Demon Hunters Association. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal frowned. It seems that President Bai has more than one trusted aide. Mr. Liu isn't the most recent one. Were we fooled by Mr. Liu? Little Silver was puzzled. Probably not. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal shook his head. That Mr. Liu is probably in the dark himself. This President Bai is very cunning. Mr. Liu was President Bai's secretary, yes, but who said that there could only be one secretary? Grenade-throwing senior Immortal couldn't help but recall a piece of social and emotional news from a while ago. A boy had used the same chat app to date more than 600 girls at the same time, and had even categorized them according to their height and 3 measurements to deceive their feelings. If an ordinary boy could do this, what more the cunning president of the Demon Hunters Association? After Mr. Liu had been closely guarded as a witness, Grenade-throwing senior Immortal had actually been on guard against President Bai's revenge, but he never expected the other party to be so bold as to choose to follow them after they left the house. This was the Sky Bridge, which had strict high-altitude control measures and all kinds of surveillance. It definitely wasn't wise to make a move here and be seen. If the other party insisted on making a move here, there was only one possibility. The other party had a magic artifact that could instantly cut off space. This reminded Grenade-throwing senior Immortal of the Wuji umbrella, which Mr. Liu had mentioned before. This was a quasi-world-defying magic artifact, made up of 49 different Holy Bee skins, and was still missing one skin to complete the incomplete product. Grenade-throwing senior Immortal gripped the steering wheel tightly and pushed his spirit perception to the maximum as he pressed a red button on the side of the steering wheel. Little Silver, what's this? Grenade-throwing senior Immortal. Brother Silver, you don't know, but this is an absolute field that I specially added for this car. As long as you press this button, it'll create a powerful spirit magnetic protective wall, also known as the F field. Oh, Little Silver was enlightened. Although he didn't quite understand, he felt that it was very awesome. Not long after Grenade-throwing senior Immortal pressed the button, Little Silver saw an azure blue spherical spirit magnetic shield around the car, which firmly protected the entire Triphibian off-road vehicle like an egg. The purpose of the spirit magnetic shield was to prevent the enemy from using flying swords to penetrate from a distance. Although the body of the vehicle had a certain amount of armor, when the spirit magnetic shield was activated, it was equivalent to double protection. Sure enough, as Grenade-throwing senior Immortal had expected, not long after his spirit magnetic shield was activated, the other party's probing flying sword had already attacked him. Through the feedback from the heat sensor in the car, they could clearly see that there was a strange fluctuation in the spirit energy magnetic field protective wall behind the car just now. This was the feedback of the protective wall being attacked. An invisible flying sword. Grenade-throwing senior Immortal tried his best to remain calm. Although the incident happened suddenly, everything was still within his expectations so far. Under normal circumstances, the invisible flying dagger was the most common method used to test the waters of a vehicle. If it succeeded, the vehicle would be destroyed and people would die. If it failed, there was no loss. It was just a basic method to test whether the vehicle was equipped with protective equipment. As the great death-courting senior, who was famous in the cultivation world, Grenade-throwing senior Immortal had experienced all kinds of unexpected situations, so he was very aware in this regard. Brother Silver, can you sense the strength of this person? Asked Grenade-throwing senior Immortal. Little Silver cupped his chin and thought for a moment before he quickly replied, probably as strong as 4 Grenade-throwing seniors. Grenade-throwing senior Immortal. When had he become a unit of measurement? But this person is a little weaker than Mr. Liu, so he's pretty easy to deal with. But we can't get out of the car now, right? Said Little Silver. It had to be said that Little Silver had brought up a critical issue. They couldn't get out of the car. That was because it was very dangerous for a car to stop midway on an air bridge unless it was waiting to get off. Whether or not it caused an accident, as long as it was caught on camera, the driver's license would be directly revoked. It was very difficult to get a driver's license nowadays, and it was now very clear that the other party wanted to take advantage of the fact that they couldn't get out of the car to take them down. Grenade-throwing senior Immortal gritted his teeth. He didn't want to sit around and wait for death. At that moment, an even more violent impact came from the side. Even with the double protection, the Triphibian off-road vehicle still shook violently and was almost swept off the road. It was still an invisible flying sword, but it was much more powerful than the previous one. The situation had become a little difficult. Grenade-throwing senior Immortal furrowed his brow tightly. Although it was still a probing attack this time, It was very clear that the invisible flying sword in the other party's hand wasn't his. And the truth was that grenade-throwing senior immortal had guessed right again. On the other side, in the clouds that hid a faint murderous aura, a member of the Demon Hunters Association sat on a floating gourd. President Bai had given this gourd to him, and it had the ability to isolate space to a certain extent. In addition to Elder Lu, this person was Elders Wu, the other senior member of the Demon Hunters Association. Today, Elders Wu had come to seek revenge, because not long ago his only younger brother, Strongswa, had been arrested, and the culprit was that green-furred dog. Strongswa had previously left a soul mark on that green-furred dog, which Wang Ling transferred to Little Silver. Later, President Bai had sent Mr. Lu to test the waters, but Mr. Lu's whereabouts were still unknown. Although it wasn't certain whether Mr. Lu had turned traitor or not, Elders Wu already couldn't hold back his urge for revenge. He had applied to President Bai for this operation, and it had been approved very quickly. This time, President Bai had given him a floating gourd with the ability to isolate space to conceal himself, and had also given him a large number of disposable invisible flying swords, more than 600 of them, for him to use as he saw fit. After that, Elders Wu had been looking for an opportunity to make his move. In daily life, the success rate of using invisible flying swords to launch a sneak attack wasn't high, and it was very easy to arouse suspicion. Thus, Elders Wu had been waiting. Finally, the day had come when the targets would set out in a vehicle. Furthermore, the other party had actually driven the vehicle onto the sky bridge. Elders Wu was well aware that you couldn't stop on the sky bridge. Thus, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For Elders Wu, this was a moving target. Furthermore, it would be best if he could destroy both the other party and the vehicle here, and make it look like a spontaneous combustion accident. Sitting on the floating gourd, Elders Wu secretly observed and pondered. A moment later, he untied the brocade bag at his waist and patted it lightly. Over 100 disposable, invisible flying swords flew out of the brocade bag, and the tips of the swords were uniformly aimed in the direction of the Trifibian off-road vehicle. The next second, Elders Wu gave the order, "Infinite Swords." Chapter 631. Over 100 invisible flying swords carried an immense pressure as they flew towards the off-road vehicle. This was a batch of invisible flying swords which President Bai of the Demon Hunters Association had specially ordered. With grenade-throwing senior immortal's eyesight, he couldn't see them at all, but Little Silver took in this spectacular scene. Wow, look, grenade throwing, a meteor shower. Little Silver couldn't help exclaiming in admiration. Grenade-throwing senior immortal. Brother Silver, now isn't the time to be amazed, Little Silver, but there are hundreds of swords flying this way now. Grenade-throwing senior immortal. More than 100 invisible flying swords descended from the sky with the aura of 10,000 arrows being shot at the same time. Each of these flying swords possessed the power of a cultivator at the pinnacle of the soul formation final stage. Just 2 probing attacks just then had almost broken through the Jeep's dual defenses. Now, over 100 flying swords were all aimed at the same target and unleashed a barrage of attacks. The SUV's defense alone definitely wouldn't be able to withstand them. Success. Elders Wu was excited. He was about to get his revenge. Anyone would feel the same at that moment. But just as Elders Wu thought that his grand plan was about to succeed, he suddenly saw the SUV's window actually open. Was it going to jump out of the car? No. On the floating gourd, Elders Wu narrowed his eyes. Then he suddenly saw something. The silver-haired young man in the front passenger seat suddenly spat out the window. Wu sneered. In his eyes, this was just a useless resistance. A mouthful of phlegm? What else could he do apart from vent his frustration? Elders Wu didn't believe that a mere mouthful of phlegm could break his infinite sword formation. But in the next moment, this mouthful of silver sputum actually blossomed like fireworks in the void, directly scattering in all directions. Elders Wu, The moment those invisible flying swords came into contact with the phlegm, they instantly disintegrated and melted away. Elders woo-woo. How could this be? Elders woo-woo cried out in his heart. The destructive power of this mouthful of phlegm was so shocking that he almost couldn't stop roaring in his heart. However, before he could react, another 2 mouthfuls of silver phlegm flew out of the window and instantly exploded in the sky. It's over. Little Silver smiled slightly. The moment the silver phlegm exploded, all the flying swords in the sky were swept away like Minesweeper. Elders woo-woo was so shocked that his mouth dropped open. At this moment, the expression on his face was one of extreme shock. It was an expression that he had never shown in his entire life. Damn it, to think that he could so easily resolve his attack. How could he cultivate? He had just lost a total of 200 Soul Formation Pinnacle disposable flying swords. It seemed that he had to use the itinerant immortal level invisible flying sword. In fact, Elders woo-woo had been selfish before. He wanted to save a few disposable invisible flying swords. President Bai had given him a total of 600 disposable invisible flying swords. 200 were at the peak late Soul Formation stage. 200 were at the early itinerant immortal stage, and 200 were at the late itinerant immortal stage. If he used all of them here, Elders woo-woo would be a pain in the ass. But just as Elders woo-woo gritted his teeth and prepared to launch an even more powerful second round of attacks, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him, and Elders woo-woo's face instantly froze. "You!" The corner of Elders woo-woo's mouth twitched. He was sitting on the floating gourd, and the space around him had been isolated, so he should have been able to conceal himself completely. But Elders woo-woo had overlooked one thing, and that was Little Silver's perception ability was beyond imagination. Little Silver's phlegm didn't just have the effect of dissolving the invisible flying swords. It could also have a reverse tracking effect. This silver phlegm could connect to Little Silver's sensory nerves through the tremor and overall strength of the invisible flying swords, and in turn capture the approximate starting point of the invisible flying swords. But this was just a rough estimate of the flying sword starting point. Because the space around Elders woo-woo was currently isolated, even if Little Silver and Elders woo-woo were extremely far apart, Little Silver still wouldn't be able to touch Elders woo-woo. This was a clone, and it couldn't see him. After confirming that the other party couldn't find him, Elders woo-woo finally breathed a sigh of relief, but the scene just now still made him break out in a cold sweat. But the question was, how on earth had the other party found him? Elders woo-woo was very puzzled. Because he couldn't get out of the car, Little Silver had created a clone, intending to have a showdown with this Elders woo-woo of the Demon Hunters Association. This person's overall strength was much weaker than Mr. Liu's, so Little Silver's clone was enough to deal with him. The only tricky thing was that the other party had used space to hide himself, which was exactly what Little Silver had guessed at the beginning. And it was very obvious that this ability wasn't Little Silver's. It was probably something that President Bai had given to this member of the Demon Hunters Association. Little Silver raised his eyebrows. After all, he was now on his way to Master's house, and he didn't want anything to happen to him. But the problem was, what on earth was he going to do in this situation? What would Master do? Little Silver pondered. At that moment, he suddenly remembered that he had already signed a contract. He should be able to get Master to help him out. It was very clearly written in the Spirit Beast, Holy Beast, contract, and Little Silver remembered that there was a clause. The contract beast could use the power of the contract to summon its master for help when necessary. It seemed that he hadn't used this contract ability even once before. Suddenly, Little Silver's lips curled up in a mischievous smile, and he really wanted to test how powerful the power of the contract was. On the other side, Elders woo-woo's hair stood on end at the silver-haired young man's secretive, naughty smile. Although he was sure that this silver-haired young man couldn't see him, the question was, what was with this harmless smile? Elders woo-woo didn't quite understand, but in the next moment, he suddenly saw this silver-haired young man actually lower his eyes and make a praying gesture with both hands, as if he was calling for something. About 10 seconds later, Elders woo-woo's expression changed dramatically, and he couldn't help tensing up. What's going on? Because at that moment, he felt a powerful spiritual pressure pressing down on him, shaking his entire body until his chi and blood flowed in reverse. The most powerful spiritual pressure pressed down on the narrow space he was in, and Elder Zwuwu's eyes instantly turned bloodshot. In the next second, Elder Zwuwu saw a hand, which looked like a youngster's. Chapter 632. This was, at that moment, Elder Zwuwu's expression changed dramatically. He couldn't believe the scene in front of him at all. This was a hand that had come from the void. It wasn't as large as he had imagined, but it gave him a great deal of pressure. Elder Zwuwu hadn't come back to his senses at all. The next moment, he was grabbed by the collar. He couldn't resist at all. In front of this hand, it was as if he had been fixed in place, and it was as if all the blood in his body had been frozen. The moment he was pulled out of the space, Elder Zwuwu felt like a salted fish that had been forcibly dragged out of the deep into the shallows. Blood suddenly gushed out of his nose like a fountain, and he was bleeding profusely. Holy shit! Little Silver was alarmed by this scene. The amount of blood was too much, like a hemorrhage, and it almost stained his clothes. Furthermore, he actually still had a collar hidden around his neck, which he had just bought from Master. Little Silver didn't want to be stained with blood like this. Not even if it was just a clone. Inside the Wong family's small villa, after helping Little Silver pull Elder Zwuwu out, Wong Ling planned to wash his hands. Because of the different pressure in the space, Elder Zwuwu couldn't withstand the pressure of the blood in his body for a moment, and blood instantly gushed out of his nose, directly causing some of it to stick to Wong Ling's hands. Wong Ling felt that this was a mistake on his part. He had acted in a hurry, and had forgotten that this hand of heaven technique had the effect of compressing space. When he had pulled Elder Zwuwu out of the space, the change in pressure would have been enough to make a normal person spit out blood. Elder Zwuwu was already lucky that he had only spat out green blood. If his realm had been lower, he would definitely have bled from all 7 orifices. In the end, Master is still the best. Little Silver couldn't help feeling a little emotional when he saw this scene up close. The opportunity to watch Master use spells up close was really too rare. This method of directly breaking open the space just now and pulling someone out was too powerful. Little Silver stared at Elder Zwuwu, who had been directly pulled out of the space by Wong Ling. He crossed his arms and pouted as he looked at him with a smile. "Do you have anything else to say?" Little Silver actually didn't want to kill this Elder Zwuwu, because he and Wong Ling had agreed that they wouldn't kill indiscriminately. In contrast, it was Elder Zwuwu who looked panicked. What was that just now? He wanted to know what on earth that terrifying hand was to actually be able to directly pull him out of the space layer, which President Bai had set up for himself in such a way that he didn't even have the slightest bit of respect for him. It was really too humiliating. After the Hand of Heaven attack, just now, Elder Zwuwu had already suffered serious internal injuries, so even though Little Silver was just a clone, it was still very easy for him to deal with him. "That's just a small skill of my master's." Little Silver spread his hands. Small skill." Elder Zwuwu almost spat out blood. "Your family's little skill can directly pull people out of the space layer?" That was obviously an extremely powerful technique. Thus, Elder Zwuwu judged that the strength of the master behind this silver-haired young man was no less than that of President Bai. At this thought, Elder Zwuwu couldn't help frowning. He had already lost this battle, so he had to think of a way to escape. Little Silver had initially wanted to keep Elder Zwuwu alive. As one of the few high-level members of the Demon Hunters Association, this was a rare tone. Given that President Bai's current whereabouts were unknown, he might be a breakthrough to get some information. "Little Silver, I don't want to kill you. If you're willing to come with me obediently, I can consider letting you go. You want to catch me? In your dreams." Elder Zwuwu grit his teeth, and a magic seal instantly blossomed in his hands as he actually used the blood he had spat out to condense in a blood essence to cast a forbidden spell. Little Silver watched as this Elder Zwuwu actually turned into a mummy right under his nose. In the SUV, Little Silver's real body projected the clone's image onto the small screen inside. Grenade-throwing Senior, immortal, saw through the nature of this forbidden spell at one glance. Is this a Western forbidden spell? A Western forbidden spell? What's that? Little Silver's real body cocked his head. It's a Western necromancy forbidden spell that can turn one's body into a zombie puppet at the cost of a certain amount of blood essence. However, this spell consumes a certain amount of lifespan, said Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. In fact, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal didn't think this was strange, because according to what that mysterious informant on the forum had previously revealed, the power behind the Demon Hunters Association was a dark force from the West called Night Chief. So it wasn't strange for a member of the Demon Hunters Association to be able to cast a Western spell. But given that President Bai's whereabouts were unknown and there was no progress at all, the sudden appearance of this high-level leader made Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal wonder if this was a turning point. Brother Silver, do you have a way to catch this person? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal asked very seriously. Little Silver's real body nodded quickly. Of course. Then, he quickly controlled his clone to chase after Elders Woo. This kind of spell, in which one's body could turn into a puppet substitute to escape, usually required a prop to be used. This prop could be a puppet, a doll, or a wax figure. Before this Elders Woo cast this forbidden spell, he had definitely already placed the prop in a safe place. Unfortunately, this kind of forbidden spell usually required blood as a medium, and it was too convenient for Little Silver to track down a spell that used blood as a medium. The moment Elders Woo had used the blood essence to cast this spell to escape, Little Silver had reacted almost instantly and subconsciously fused a drop of his blood with the blood essence that Elders Woo had used. Next, Little Silver would use the holy beast blood to track him. Thus, Elders Woo wouldn't be able to escape at all. No matter where he ran, Little Silver would be able to smell his drop of holy beast blood. On the other side, Elders Woo had escaped from death and instantly used the puppet substitute spell to fly thousands of li away. This was a spell that could only be used to save his life. As a high-level member of the Demon Hunters Association, Elders Woo had already thought of everything he could think of before taking his revenge, including life-saving measures. In order to cast the puppet substitute spell, Elders Woo had prepared a wax figure of his own in advance to use as a substitute. But Elders Woo never expected that he would actually have to use it. The great advantage of this puppet substitute spell was that it wouldn't be interrupted midway, which meant that it could escape the scene 100% of the time and avoid all kinds of sure-kill attacks. But there was also a limitation, and that was that as a prop to replace the original body, it couldn't be too far away from the original body. 1,000 kilometers was already the limit of the prop. Even if the other party sensed it and wanted to track it down, it would still take time. But just as Elders Woo was rejoicing that he had escaped disaster, a figure holding a black umbrella suddenly appeared in a corner. Suddenly, a figure holding a black umbrella appeared in the corner. I gave you 600 invisible flying swords. Why don't you use them all at once? Elders Woo's expression changed drastically at this voice. He turned his face and was so frightened that he immediately dropped to one knee on the ground. President Bai. Chapter 633. Elders Woo never expected President Bai to appear here. Furthermore, he was well aware that this wasn't President Bai's real body, but a clone. But even though it was just a clone, it still made him feel great pressure. He had bought this dark room in the basement of a high-class apartment in the center of Songhai City, and it was used to hide the wax figures. The dark room's predecessor was actually an underground supermarket. When Elders Woo had found this place back then, the underground supermarket had been sealed, and the sales staff in the residential area had been evasive. Distressed because they hadn't been able to find a tenant or a buyer, they had lowered the rent and price 3 times in a row. Elders Woo hadn't even checked before directly buying the place. It wasn't just because it was cheap. More importantly, the terrain here was extremely shady, which made it very suitable for casting a dark room to hide replacement puppet wax figures. Many forbidden spells didn't just require human intervention. The terrain was also very important. The location of this dark room was a big factor in Elder Wu's ability to instantaneously cast a spell to escape here. Truly useless, good-for-nothings. At that moment, Elder Wu knelt in the middle with a defeated expression on his face, blood still dripping from the corners of his mouth. In front of him was a thin, deathly pale president with a black umbrella in his hand. Even if it was just the power of a clone, that cold snort just now was still like rolling thunder that shook the bottom of Elder Wu's heart. Elder Wu couldn't help but bleed from his orifices. President Bai's cultivation was too high, far beyond what Elder Wu had imagined, and he felt a little overwhelmed. Was this the power of a true immortal? Sure enough, his every movement was accompanied by great majesty. Next to the young man stood a man whom Elder Wu had never seen before. He wore a purple Taoist robe and had heavy makeup on his face, which actually gave him the charm of a woman. He was a very beautiful man. Similarly, this man was also a clone. Elder Wu had never seen him before, but the fact that he could stand directly next to President Bai like this was enough to show that this person's status wasn't ordinary. Jixing, what do you think? President Bai called out the man's name lightly. If he had directly unleashed 600 flying sword from the very beginning, even if he couldn't kill the other side, he would still have suffered a loss. We can also make the other side suffer a loss. This beautiful young man called Jixing replied. So it's very clear that there's something wrong with this Elder Wu's thinking. Elder Wu gritted his teeth, a little unwilling. President Bai stared at this scene and frowned. Wu, what do you want to say? There's a powerful being behind the other side. He directly reached out and pulled me out of the space layer. There's nothing I can do. I hope the president can understand this. He is not an enemy this subordinate can deal with. Speaking up to this point, Elder Wu was very excited. He was still suffering from internal injuries from the impact of the Hand of Heaven, and coupled with President Bai's pressure now, he was so excited that his chi and blood couldn't help flowing in reverse. Blood spurted out from his nose again. The beautiful man called Jixing smiled coldly. Isn't this the result of you delaying the battle? President Bai, and I guessed early on that the other party had an almighty overseeing it, which was why President Bai gave you 600 invisible flying swords at once. But what about you? You probably wanted to save the flying swords so that you could line your own pockets later and use them for something else, right? When Jixing said this, President Bai's face darkened. Zhuowu had worked under him for many years and hadn't worked any shorter than Mr. Lu's. But in the end, there was still something wrong with his thinking. President Bai felt that Elder Wu had gone too far in thinking that he actually hadn't seized the opportunity of the ambush to directly kill the other party. Instead, he had been thinking about his own future interests. Thus, President Bai's expression was particularly solemn. Zhuowu, you disappoint me. He clenched his fists so hard that they actually created a deafening explosion, which shook Elder Wu so much that his vision went black on the spot, and he almost fainted. Elder Wu's injuries worsened. Even if he recovered from these kinds of injuries, there would be very serious sequelae. Furthermore, if he wasn't the slightest bit careful, he might be forever stuck at this realm in the future. Zhuowu, the deathly pale young man, stared at him with the eyes of a torturer from hell. You've worked under me for many years, and I've never done anything too extreme to you. But today's miscalculation was truly unforgivable. This is just a punishment. For the time being, I'll spare your life. Elder Wu couldn't care less about the blood gushing out of his orifices at all. He was sweating profusely and trembling all over. Then he saw President Bai straightaway turn his back on him and say indifferently, Jixing, let's go. The pretty man next to President Bai didn't say anything. Before he left, he just cast a very pitiful glance at Elder Wu before finally turning around and disappearing with President Bai. After the two of them left, Elder Wu breathed a huge sigh of relief, as if the sound of thunder had calmed his anger. Damn it! Elder Wu pounded the ground in pain. He couldn't forget the way that beautiful man called Jixing had looked at him like a pitiful worm before he left. Although he hadn't shown any expression, The heavy sense of ridicule in his eyes had already shattered Elders Wuwu's self-esteem. Elders Wuwu was very unhappy in his heart, but he couldn't find any reason to refute it, because he had been analyzed correctly on every point. In the battle just now, he had indeed been selfish and wanted to leave behind a batch of invisible flying swords for later use. But at the same time, Elders Wuwu hadn't expected the other party to actually have such a powerful almighty keeping watch. He could not forget the hand that had dragged him out of the space layer. That hand clearly looked like the hand of a youth. The skin was delicate and exquisite, but it gave off a strong, oppressive feeling, as if the sky was pressing down on him, as if it had infinite ruling power. Elders Wuwu took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down and stop thinking about it. Right now, it was more important to recover from his injuries. He had used the puppet substitution spell to escape to this place. So, in theory, no one could have known, no matter how strong that person was, there was no way he could have predicted that he would be hiding here, right? Cursing in his heart, Elders Wuwu then took out a jade bottle from his chest pocket, which contained an entire bottle of Jinshuang Dahuan pills, which are used to recover from injuries in an emergency and could suppress internal injuries to the lowest level. But just as Elders Wuwu poured the bottle of Dahuan pills into his mouth, the supermarket's iron gate actually burst open with a bang. Elders Wuwu was so frightened that he directly spat out the Dahuan pill he hadn't swallowed. Chapter 634. This surprise is a little too big. Little Silver's appearance directly scared Elders Wuwu so much that several blood vessels in his body burst one after another, and his injuries worsened. He didn't know how this silver-haired young man had found this place. At that moment, Elders Wuwu's forehead was also covered in cold sweat, and he had no time to consider what method this silver-haired young man had used. Little Silver projected this scene into the SUV. Looking at the scene where Little Silver's clone was in, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal somehow felt that the surroundings of this underground supermarket seemed a little familiar. Wait a minute, wasn't this the place where that old devil and the Master of Shadowstream hid and ordered takeout? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal carefully examined his surroundings to confirm that he wasn't seeing things. Then, he took a deep breath and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. History is indeed shockingly similar. In fact, it hadn't been long since the old devil had been arrested, and there had been a relatively long interrogation period between his imprisonment and his final sentence. Usually, it took around half a year to a year. But since the old devil's incident, quite a number of people had already entered Songhai, first prison. The younger sister of the Master of Shadowstream, Jiang Luing, had been the first to enter, followed by the old devil and the Master of Shadowstream herself, Jiang Luiwei. After that, Master of Immortal Mansion Shan Yu and Evil Sword God were also sent to prison. As key prisoners, they were put in spirit shackles and locked in the same special cell as the old devil. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was suddenly a little curious about what it would be like if President Bai was also arrested. 3 people could only play Fight the Landlord, but 4 people could play Mahjong. Brother Silver, keep him alive. This is a good chance to catch President Bai, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said as he drove the SUV steadily. Little Silver nodded. Okay, I'll do my best. Although this was just a clone and Little Silver couldn't unleash his full strength, Elders Wuwu's current injuries were too severe. If the other party struggled or resisted, his injuries could worsen and his life wouldn't be in danger. So Little Silver had initially wanted to try persuading her first. I can instantly heal your internal injuries without leaving any aftereffects. Are you willing to come with me? Little Silver stared at Elders Wuwu and raised his condition. An internal injury of this degree could be completely healed with just a few drops of sacred beast blood. But Elders Wuwu's eyes were full of resistance, and it was very clear that he had no intention of surrendering. Although Little Silver's offer was indeed very tempting, Elders Wuwu wasn't a fool. Judging from the silver-haired young man's attitude toward him, it was clear that the other party didn't want to kill him. Instead, the other party was trying to persuade him to surrender and give up information on the Demon Hunters Association and President Bai. Elders Wu now suddenly understood a little why Mr. Liu's whereabouts were unknown. In view of the other party's methods, it was very likely that Mr. Liu had already been persuaded to surrender and was being closely protected as a tainted witness. Mr. Liu, you've already hidden him, haven't you? Elders Wu clutched his chest, where his qi and blood were surging. The moment he spoke, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He seemed to understand a little why President Bai was still willing to keep this Elders Wu by his side, despite his mediocre realm. It was precisely because this Elders Wu was very smart. Sometimes, a high realm didn't mean a good strategy. Any expert who was difficult to deal with would definitely have a strategist at their side. It was very obvious that Elders Wu was this type of person. Unfortunately, there were times when this kind of person would often be the victim of his own cleverness. The best proof of this smart Elder Wu's miscalculation was that he had been planning to hide the invisible flying sword and hadn't chosen to use it all. Although Little Silver didn't say anything, Elders Wu already knew the answer from the look in his eyes. His eyes were fixed on Little Silver, and even in this dire situation, he didn't show the slightest hesitation. I advise you to give up. My rank in the association is the same as Mr. Liu's, but I definitely won't surrender as easily as he did. In the end, a demon is a demon. They'll surrender when they're afraid, and they don't have the slightest backbone. But if you think I'm in cahoots with those demons, then you're gravely mistaken. Little Silver pouted. He hadn't expected this Elders Wu to actually be so strong-willed. You have no idea how long I've been by President Bai's side. Elders Wu clenched his fists tightly. He didn't care at all whether other people understood him or not. Back then, when he was at his lowest, it was President Bai who took him in, and it was all because of President Bai that he was able to reach his current realm. He was one of the earliest members of the Demon Hunters Association when it was first established, and he had spent a lot of time building it up. Elders Wu had thought that he could already become President Bai's confidant, but he never thought that there would actually be a beautiful man standing next to President Bai whom he had never seen before. Elders Wu thought that he had a list of all the elders of the Demon Hunters Association in his little notebook, but this Ji Xing, who on earth was he? He had done so much for the president for so many years, but he still hadn't gained President Bai's complete trust. Elders Wu's heart ached as he felt a chill run down his spine. He had clearly been here first. How could he be so familiar with the president? The more he thought about it, the more agitated he became. At first, his heart wavered a little, but in the end, he was so angry that he couldn't stop trembling, and even his eyes turned blood red. There was something very wrong with this state, and Little Silver frowned deeply. Do you know? Elders Wu's eyes were red as he stared at Little Silver. Little Silver, I can die for the president, Elders Wu said resolutely. Little Silver sweated. Bro, you have to calm down, bro. However, Elders Wu already couldn't listen to him anymore. His entire face had already changed at the question in his heart just now. Even his state of mind had changed. The look in the eyes of that man called Ji Xing before he left seemed to haunt him like a nightmare. Elders Wu sneered, and his face, which was purple and white because of his internal injuries, had a cold expression that made Little Silver's hair stand on end. Don't even think about getting any information from me. I will use my death to prove my loyalty to the president. As soon as he said that, Elders Wu actually put his hand directly into his pants and took out a magic artifact the size of a marble. This was the Tiangang Thunder. It was a very rare, explosive magic artifact, which contained the heavenly tribulation lightning of a soul formation cultivator's tribulation, and was extremely powerful. Chapter 635. At that moment, President Bai and this elder Ji Xing next to him weren't far above this apartment building. The two of them had just turned around and teleported to the top floor of this apartment building. They had just bought this place at a price that the original owner couldn't refuse in order to keep an eye on Elders Wu's movements. The truth was that President Bai had already anticipated Elders Wu's failure in this operation. Before Elders Wu made his move, He had specially found a fortune teller to do a divination, and the result of the divination was a vicious one. At that moment, the surveillance camera was showing Elder Zwo Wu's secret darkroom, which had been transformed into an underground supermarket. The moment before he left, President Bai had left behind an eye of nothingness. It was his own eyeball, which had been directly plucked out of its socket to be used for surveillance when necessary. Because of his powerful self-healing ability, any organ in his body was dispensable to him. Even if his heart was dug out, it could grow back in an instant. So when the Demon Hunters Association had just started, President Bai had specifically found black market merchants who bought the organs of high-level cultivators and relied on selling his own organs to hoard a lot of money. Through the image from the eyeball, President Bai was monitoring everything that was happening in the supermarket at that moment. As he looked at the image, Ji Xing's voice came from the side. I was wondering why Lord President let Zwo Wu go. It turns out you already expected him to commit suicide? As he spoke, the beautiful man didn't forget to take out a powder puff to fix his slightly cracked makeup. His makeup was too thick, and sometimes the slightest smile could cause the powder to fall off or crack. So he always carried a powder puff with him to touch up his makeup from time to time. President Bai leaned back on the sofa, the black Wuji umbrella floating quietly above his head behind him as he said indifferently, After all, Zwo Wu has been with me for many years, and I know his nature quite well. While he hadn't chosen to directly kill Elder Zwo Wu just now because of their many years of relationship as master and servant, it was actually only a very small part of it. If he really cared about friendship, he wouldn't have deliberately attacked Elder Zwo Wu when Elder Zwo Wu was seriously injured just now, causing him a second injury. In fact, it was that attack that had clearly told Elder Zwo Wu his attitude. Elder Zwo Wu had to die. However, President Bai hoped that Elder Zwo Wu would do it himself. This way, he would feel less guilty. Of course, it didn't matter if Elder Zwo Wu didn't understand what he meant. He would have Elder Ji Xing act on his behalf and get rid of Elder Zwo Wu. But looking at the current situation, there was really no need for that. Elder Zwo Wu has followed Lord President for many years. If Elder Zwo Wu really died, Lord President would probably be very sad, right? Ji Xing sneered. Sad? Perhaps, if I have time in the future, I'll go to Zwo Wu's grave to light incense for him on New Year's and other festivals. President Bai said, We don't have much time left. This is all for the smooth execution of a master plan. Elder Ji Xing raised his eyebrows. He knew what the master plan President Bai was talking about was. This master plan was the ultimate goal of the Demon Hunters Association in expanding its power in Huaxiao Nation all these years. Everything was for the sake of obtaining the grade 13 spell, Moon Burial Spell, which Devil King had left behind in Beast King's remains back then. As long as they could obtain this world-destroying spell, everything would be under the control of the Demon Hunters Association and Night Chief. Since they were planning for great things, appropriate sacrifices were necessary. For the sake of the Moon Burial plan, Night Chief had already put in a lot of effort from the moment they set up the Demon Hunters Association in Huaxiao Nation. At that moment, President Bai stared at the image from his eyeball on the monitor and smiled mysteriously. You're right this time, Ji Xing. My judgment has always been accurate. The limitless umbrella in the president's hand was forged by me. Since I was the one who made this Wuji umbrella in Lord President's hand, I naturally have a special sensitivity to materials. Back then, I used 49 pieces of holy beast fur to forge this Wuji umbrella. Even after I finished refining it, there are still some flaws, but now... Ji Xing smiled and stared at the silhouette of the silver-haired young man in the monitor. From the looks of it, we can finally make up for this shortcoming. In order to obtain Devil King's level 13 technique, the ultimate umbrella is also the key. Looking at the monitor image again, the two of them could already see Elder Zwo Wu take out the Tian Gang grenade from his crotch with an excited expression on his face. Brother Silver, is there a way to stop him? At the same time, in the SUV, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was also looking at the image projected by Little Silver's clone. He had wanted Little Silver to try and stop him, but he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Sometimes, a person's imagination was just too terrifying. Little Silver actually hadn't said anything at all, but this elder's woo had already started to get excited, as if it was useless no matter who tried to persuade him. Then, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal saw the resolute look in Elder's Woo's eyes. There was a strong sense of déjà vu in the sect leader's righteous decision to sacrifice himself for the sake of everyone else when the 6 major sects besieged Light Sect. Because of his family's connection to the Tang sect, a major hidden weapons sect, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had a certain understanding of hidden weapons. If the Tiangang grenade was detonated at a distance, it wouldn't kill you. But the problem now was that Elder's Wu was seriously injured, and if it was detonated at such a close distance, he would undoubtedly die. No way. This Elder's Wu had to be saved. Although Little Silver's holy beast blood could heal injuries, it couldn't completely bring people back to life. There was only one way. While driving, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was quick-witted and immediately texted Wang Ling, "Brother Ling, are you there? It's urgent. I know you're spying." Wang Ling replied almost instantly, "Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, it's an emergency. I've caught an elder of the Demon Hunters Association, and he wants to commit suicide. Do you have a way to bring him back to life?" Wang Ling's reply was very simple. "Restricted access, I can't get out." It was obvious that Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had already expected this. "Then can I ask Brother Ling to help me deliver something to Brother Silver's clone?" Wang Ling, ? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal replied with 2 words, "Soul Suppression Ring." This was the only way he could think of to bring Elder's Wu back to life unscathed. "Wang Ling, it's just a transmission. It shouldn't be broken, right, Brother Ling?" Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal reluctantly took off the Soul Suppression Ring. "I bought 100 million yuan insurance." Chapter 636. 100 million yuan for insurance. Because of the restrictions on pocket money, it was actually very hard for most kids Wang Ling's age to imagine what 100 million yuan was like. They only knew that it was a huge sum of money. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. Why did he have to use 100 million yuan for insurance? Even if the ring was destroyed, as long as he provided the raw materials for a few million, he could make a dozen more. That was 100 million yuan. How many crispy noodle snacks could he buy with that? He could even open a noodle factory to produce and sell it himself. Wang Ling felt that this was a very extravagant and wasteful act. It wasn't right. 100 million yuan. What a pity, but maybe this was what a big shot was like. After all, for big shots, 100 million yuan was just a small target. On the other side, Elder's Wu was already fully prepared to die a heroic death. This Tiangang grenade actually didn't do much damage to Little Silver. Strictly speaking, it couldn't even hurt his clone at all. At most, it would cause some superficial damage. Furthermore, even Little Silver's clone actually had an extremely strong self-healing ability and would be able to recover very quickly. Holding the Tiangang grenade, Elder's Wu had a resolute expression on his face as he prepared to die a heroic death, just like those Huaxiao anti-Yang heroes from thousands of years ago. Little Silver had been watching Huaxiao's domestic TV series recently. When Sun Island invaded Huaxiao thousands of years ago, there were countless domestic Huaxiao anti-Yang heroes. The moment the Yang devils had charged into the battlefield, many of them had died bravely with grenades in hand. They had become national heroes who were praised and revered by the people. At that moment, Little Silver felt that the resolute look in Elder's Wu's eyes was exactly like what he saw in a TV series. It was too lifelike. Elder's Wu should have the talent to be an actor, right? While Little Silver's thoughts were running wild, he saw a large hand reach out from nothingness. The hand of God. It was Master's hand. Master had sent Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's ring. Little Silver was suddenly very excited. He felt that this hand was very beautiful. The bones of the fingers were distinct and flawless, like an extremely exquisite piece of jade porcelain. Little Silver was a little dazed as he looked at the hand, and then he couldn't help swallowing. For some reason, he actually had the urge to lick it. Little Silver was now looking forward more and more to the day when Master would tie a rope around his collar and take him for a stroll on the street. Being held by such a beautiful pair of hands for a stroll, what a beautiful scene. While he was pondering this, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's soul suppression ring had already been delivered to Elders Wu. This was the second time Elders Wu had seen Wang Ling's hand, and he was scared out of his wits. Get out of my way. Even if I, Zhuwu, die today, I'll drag you down with me. Saying that, Elders Wu crushed the bead in his hand, and the Tian Gang grenade detonated on the spot. The deafening sound of thunder blew up the entire underground supermarket, directly turning it into dust. The power of the Tian Gang thunder was enormous. If it was detonated here, the entire building would be blown through. But it just so happened that Wang Ling's hand of heaven was there to erase the powerful aftermath of the explosion, so the situation didn't look so serious. On the monitor above the building, President Bai and Elder Ji Xing stood up. In the instant of the explosion, the Eye of Nothingness had also been destroyed, and the image on the monitor turned into a blur. The Tian Gang grenade had indeed detonated, and they had all felt the apartment building tremble just now. But in theory, the power of the Tian Gang grenade should have been enough to make the entire building collapse. The person behind this must have made a move again. President Bai narrowed his eyes. Since the other party had the formidable strength to tear the space apart, he reckoned that it would be more than enough to withstand the aftermath of the explosion. Elder Jixing nodded, then quickly closed his eyes. After sensing for a bit, he said with a teasing smile, "But even so, the other party can't prevent Elders Wu's death. Everything is as President Bai predicted. Elders Wu's aura has disappeared, and he died a rather tragic death." President Bai took a deep look at the ground under his feet, and the expression on his face said that the outcome had been decided. "All right, let's go." As soon as he turned around, Elder Ji Xing moved closer to him, and the small black umbrella floating in the air behind him suddenly started to spin at that moment. It slowly grew larger and covered the top of their heads with a black light. Finally, it disappeared. About 2 or 3 minutes after President Bai left, Elders Wu, who had already been blown to ashes by the Tian Gang grenade, let out a pained cry. "Damn it, that hurts!" Only now did he realize how painful it was to be blown up by a thunderbolt. It really hurt too much. It felt like his whole body was splitting apart. Wait. It looked like he was already splitting apart. But why was he still conscious? Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case. The Tian Gang grenade was extremely destructive. Once a person's body was destroyed, even their soul would be destroyed by the aftermath of the Tian Gang grenade. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to be conscious. Could it be that it was because his obsession was too deep that another kind of supernatural phenomenon had caused him to become an earthbound spirit? Elders Wu was very shocked at this unexpected turn of events, because this was already beyond his scope of consideration. He was already dead, but it also seemed like he wasn't. Although he still couldn't move, the scene in front of him was fixed on the supermarket that had already been blown to smithereens. The most important thing was that the silver-haired young man was still standing in front of him and hadn't left from beginning to end. That Tian Gang grenade just now actually hadn't caused the slightest bit of harm to this silver-haired young man at such a close range. Elders Wu felt that he had used a stupid and wasteful method of suicide. What on earth was going on? Elders Wu had no idea what was going on at all. He only saw the sand floating in the air around him, reassembling itself bit by bit along with the flesh. Elders Wu. Right after that, an incredible scene happened. Elders Wu, who had already been blown to ashes by the Tian Gang grenade, found that his body was actually being reconstructed bit by bit. Every strand of hair was exactly the same as when he had been alive, and what was even more amazing was that even his internal injuries were completely healed. And what shocked Elders Wu the most was that his Taoist robe, which should have been destroyed by the explosion, was actually being restored as well. It was only in that instant that Elders Wu realized that he hadn't died. He had probably been brought back to life by some kind of power. Little Silver slowly walked over to Elder Zwu and picked up the soul suppression ring on the ground. While the Tiangang grenade was ferocious, the soul suppression ring was, in the end, a world-defying magic weapon. This level of damage couldn't harm it at all. Little Silver took out a wet wipe from his pocket and wiped the inside and outside of the soul suppression ring. He then watched Elder Zhuo's body recover bit by bit, and he couldn't help smiling at him. That explosion just now must have hurt a lot, right? If you don't believe it, you can blow it up a few more times. In any case, you definitely won't die. Chapter 637. Elder Zwu never thought that he would actually be completely resurrected. Even his internal injuries had been healed, and he was brimming with energy and vigor. He didn't need to guess to know that this had to be the strength of that almighty senior who had directly dragged him out of the space layer with one hand. To actually be able to bring someone back from the dead, what kind of formidable power was this? Elder Zhuo's gaze couldn't help focusing on the simple black ring in Little Silver's hand. He didn't know its origin, but he was sure that it was the ring's power that had brought him back to life. A magic ring with a resurrection attribute. It was obvious that it had to have been made by that senior behind the scenes. When he had seen a pair of big hands appear earlier, it had to be this senior who had delivered the ring. Looking at Elder Zhuo's stupefied face, Little Silver couldn't help spreading his hands. This is all basic, no need to be too shocked. My master actually doesn't need a ring to bring people back to life. Bring people back to life without a magic artifact. Elder Zhuo's heart shook. Could it be that your master is the embodiment of heavenly Tao? But in the end, Elder Zhu didn't dare ask directly, because he had already realized that his strength and that of the almighty senior behind the scenes weren't in the same dimension at all. This almighty senior was even more powerful than President Bai. Even President Bai couldn't create a magic artifact with a resurrection attribute. As far as Elder Zhu knew, there was a resurrection spell, but it had long been lost. Furthermore, when he recalled his experience of being resurrected just now, it was more like the power of this resurrection ring had frozen his soul in place and directly used it as a foundation to recreate a brand new body. It wasn't hard for Elder Zhu to determine this, because he had been conscious throughout the resurrection process. As for what Little Silver said about being able to bring people back to life without a magic artifact, Elder Zhu felt that he had no reason not to believe it. This was a power that was in a completely different dimension. At that moment, Elder Zhu didn't even dare think about what level that senior was at. I'm very curious. After experiencing death by self-detonation once, Elder Zhu had calmed down. Given the strength of this senior behind the scenes, it should be easy for him to kill President Bai if he wants to uphold justice. Why go through so much trouble? Because this is a society ruled by law. Little Silver replied swiftly. Elder Zhu was lost in thought at this response, and he had nothing to say in response. Although Little Silver hadn't been with Wang Ling for long, he had learned a lot about the rules of human society. Most of the time, one's worldview would be influenced by one's surroundings. Little Silver had always felt that following Wang Ling unswervingly was the right decision. As Elder Zhu had said, given Master's methods, it would be a piece of cake for him to get rid of President Bai. But in the current situation, they had to send this President Bai to prison alive to play mahjong, which was much more difficult than just getting rid of him, because there were still too many unknown secrets about President Bai. Sitting cross-legged, Elder Zhu looked inside his brand new body. As expected, the curse mark which President Bai had originally carved into his body had disappeared. This curse was used to prevent members of the Demon Hunters Association from divulging the organization's secrets, but it was only effective on humans. Among the many high-level members of the Demon Hunters Association, only Mr. Liu was a demon. Now, that Elder Zhu thought about it carefully. He felt that the reason President Bai kept Mr. Liu by his side all this time was probably to prevent Mr. Liu from carelessly divulging the secret. Everything made sense now. Elder Zhu sighed in his heart as he recalled President Bai's furious demand to find Mr. Liu as soon as possible when there was no news of him a while ago. Since you already have Mr. Lu's statement, why do you still insist on finding me? Elder Zhuowu asked as he stared at Little Silver. After all, Mr. Lu is a demon, and humans and demons walk different paths. Even if Mr. Lu has some information on the Demon Hunters Association, it's definitely limited, right? Little Silver replied. Hearing this, Elder Zhuowu's body shook. He never expected this seemingly harmless silver-haired young man, who seemed a little otherworldly, to actually be a guy with a pretty high IQ. In fact, this was indeed the case. President Bai hadn't told Mr. Lu everything, and the truth was that Mr. Lu knew very little. It was actually Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal who had taught Little Silver everything in the car. Elder Zhuowu sighed deeply. Since you want to know so much, then leave. I'm willing to tell you the truth. I've already lost this fight. You admit defeat just like that? I thought you'd resist a few more times. You should still have the Tian gang grenades on you, right? Why don't you blow them up a few more times? When they exploded just now, the lightning tribulation inside was like fireworks. I think it was really pretty. Little Silver's eyes widened. Elder Zhuowu realized that this silver-haired young man seemed a little dim-witted. I'm indebted to President Bai, so I really couldn't betray him before. In order to keep this secret, I could even sacrifice my life. But I've already died once, so I don't owe him anything, Elder Zhuowu said lightly. His words were very clear, but Little Silver didn't let down his guard. In the SUV, after confirming that Elder Zhuowu had surrendered, Little Silver used his clone to keep an eye on Elder Zhuowu as he immediately took out his phone and started to type a text message. Out of the corner of his eye, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal glanced at the recipient of Little Silver's text message and felt that the number was a little familiar. Who are you texting? Little Master, Little Silver replied quickly. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was blank. Master was Wang Ling. But who was Little Master? Brother Silver. Is this Little Master related to Brother Ling? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal asked. Of course, isn't Little Master the scapegoat for Master? Little Silver replied. Realization dawned on Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. So, this Little Master was talking about, odd. What freaking Little Master? After Little Silver stayed by Elder Zhuowu's side for about 10 minutes, the police were the first to arrive on the scene. Because of the thunderstorm caused by the Tian gang thunder, the residents in the neighborhood had been alarmed, and a number of fire trucks and police cars had swiftly sealed off the basement of this apartment building. Although the basement was already a mess, when the police and firefighters arrived, none of them took action. That was because before they had arrived, Warden Liang had called from the top to tell them to follow Director Zhuo's arrangements. Zhuo had been the chief commander of President Bai's case from the very beginning, so it was quite reasonable for him to be in charge of this matter. That's the situation, Mr. Little Silver. Director Zhuo will be here soon. The district police captain saluted Little Silver. On the side, Elder Zhuowu, who was sitting cross-legged, raised his eyelids lazily. Director Zhuo? Who is this? He thought the name sounded a little familiar. My little master, Little Silver replied. Very strong. Of course. The master of Shadow Stream, Devil Emperor Guapai, and the master of Immortal Mansion all fell at his hands. Chapter 638. Elder Zhuowu was more well-behaved than Little Silver had imagined. Before Zhuo had arrived, he had been sitting cross-legged on the spot and hadn't made any strange movements. Little Silver was worried that Elder Zhuowu was feigning surrender, so he had been using his perception to check if there were any fluctuations of spirit energy coming from Elder Zhuowu. He was worried that Elder Zhuowu would tip President Bai off, so he had been on guard. Even if it was a small communication spell, there would still be spiritual power overflowing when the spell was cast. But Elder Zhuowu looked like he had completely surrendered and wasn't putting up any resistance at all. Brother Little Silver, you've worked hard. Leave the rest to me. Zhuo and Little Silver took over. The moment he saw Zhuo shackle Elder Zhuowu with the spirit shackles, Little Silver heaved a sigh of relief. The spirit shackles were the same treasure that had been used to capture the old devil previously. As long as it was worn, It could completely suppress even the power of a true immortal. But rather than saying that it suppressed power, it was better to say that it suppressed the circulation of spirit energy and prevented it from forming hand seals. Its function was like a spirit energy remover. It was a magic artifact that could forcibly suppress the output of spirit energy. The structure of the spirit shackles was even more complicated than that of the spirit energy remover. Not counting the other components, there were already 6 spirit energy removers sealed inside the spirit shackles. Hence, the development of the spirit shackles had always been quite troublesome. After the old devil's arrest, Huaxiao Nation's Cultivation Academy of Science only had 1 spirit shackles left. Then, the master of Immortal Mansion had been arrested, and the number of spirit shackles had officially come to an end. The one that Elders Wu was wearing now was one of the ones that the Academy of Science had just produced after working overtime. As far as Ajwa knew, there actually weren't many in stock. Apart from the one that Elders Wu was wearing, there was only 1 new spirit shackles that the Research Institute had produced. If it wasn't for Elders Wu's suicidal tendencies, Ajwa wouldn't have brought the spirit shackles with him. But given the current situation, it was better to be cautious before Elders Wu was officially taken into custody. As Ajwa thought this, he directed someone to take Elders Wu to the prison car. Songhai First Prison had a powerful barrier to suppress prisoners, so after Elders Wu was taken inside, there was actually no need to wear the spirit shackles. An artifact like the spirit shackles should only be given to prisoners who were at the level of playing mahjong. This sudden incident, which started with Elders Wu taking the lead, finally came to an end with his arrest. Ajwa hadn't leaked the news to the media, but had done his best to suppress it. President by now mistakenly believed that Elders Wu was already dead, which was a very good smokescreen. Perhaps it could be used as a strategic layout to set President Bai up. Inside the prison car, Ajwa sat next to Elders Wu with a calm and composed look on his face, which made Elders Wu feel a little embarrassed. Even if he was wearing the spirit shackles, he was still a murderer who had a certain level of martial art skills. This person was actually completely unafraid of him. When all was said and done, he was someone who had weathered great storms. Feeling a little uncomfortable under Elders Wu's gaze, Ajwa frowned and looked back at him. "You have the right to remain silent." Elders Wu was silent for a while, then couldn't help asking, "Are you really only at the Golden Core stage?" This was what Elders Wu was very curious about. Generally speaking, none of Huaxiao's leading cadres were lower than the nascent soul stage. And at the Golden Core stage, they were at most police captains or something like that. If a leading Golden Core cadre didn't have any meritorious service, it was actually very easy for people to think that he had gone through the back door. But the problem was that it was harder for an ordinary Golden Core cultivator to achieve meritorious service than to reach the sky. So how this Director Zhua had been able to help capture the Master of Shadow Stream, the Old Devil, the Master of Immortal Mansion, and Evil Sword God back then was a rather mystical question. Ishua smiled. "What? Are you looking down on Golden Core cultivators?" In fact, Elders Wu wasn't the only one who had asked this question, so Ajwa was already used to it. Since he had taken office, there had actually been no end to all kind of talk about him, but he wasn't flustered at all. Ajwa still remembered how he had inexplicably killed the Demon King back then and become deputy director. At that time, he had indeed felt very flustered, but that feeling had now disappeared, because he was well aware that he had a very powerful Shifu. When the prison car was about to reach Songhai First Prison, Elders Wu asked curiously, "Are Devil Emperor Guapai, the Master of Immortal Mansion, and Evil Sword God really locked up there?" "Every time, and they're all locked up in the same special cell." Ajwa nodded. "Why? Do you still want to get their autographs?" Elders Wu looked as if he had been hit on the nail on the head, and he stared at Ajwa longingly. Can I?" Ajwa smiled slightly. "Don't even think about it. You're too weak to be locked up with them." "Elders Wu, Ajwa. But if you're willing to tell me the truth, I can help you get their autographs." Elders Wu, this was a move that Ajwa had just thought of, and had been inspired by his Shifu Wangling. Why was Loopy Toad so rich? Actually, a lot of the money had been given to it by Ajwa, who had asked it to record Wang Ling's daily life at home so that it could comprehend it. What realm was Shifu at? His every word and deed was worth pondering. A while ago, Ajwa had asked Loopy Toad to write down all the exercise papers that Wang Ling had bought, and Ajwa had run to the bookstore to buy the exact same ones and had started to do the exercises. Although it had been many years since he had graduated, Ajwa firmly believed that his Shifu definitely had a reason for doing these exercises. The Shifu showed the way, but it was up to the individual to cultivate. Ajwa had to work harder. Like this time, when he had used Wang Ling's autograph to tempt Elders Wu into confessing, Ajwa had comprehended the deal Wang Ling had made with the Heavenly Tao a few hours ago. Equivalent exchange. Not only was this suitable for dealing with the Heavenly Tao, it was also suitable for inducing confessions. At around 8 o'clock in the evening, Little Silver and Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal successfully arrived at the Wang family's small villa. When they entered, Mother Wang was overjoyed. "Yo, Miss Silver, you're here." Mother Wang had always firmly believed that this fair-faced girl was a girl. Grenade-throwing brought me here." Little Silver nodded. He didn't find it strange that Mother Wang had misunderstood his gender. This was Master's Lord Mother, and he didn't care at all about gender misunderstandings if he could make her so happy. "Where's Grenade-throwing? Why don't you come in and sit down? He has something to do, so he's going back first." Little Silver waved his hand, then took out 2 large sacks of broccoli from his storage bag. "Grenade-throwing just planted these broccoli recently. They're all for Senior." Mother Wang dropped her forehead. "That's too much. Actually, there's already more than they could eat at home." Chapter 639. Although Little Silver was usually brainless, he was right about one thing, and that was the main reason why Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal hadn't come through the door this time. In fact, the main reason was still broccoli. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal felt that he had brought too little. Old man Yuan Longping, the founder of Magic Rice, didn't even need Jinkala to be able to produce 180 million kilograms of immortal rice per mu in the extremely dry and uninhabitable desert of death. What kind of formidable planning technique was this? And most importantly, the old man hadn't applied for a patent for this technique at all. If he had, he would have become the richest man in the world. But he hadn't. That was because from the very beginning, the old man's goal had been to benefit all of humanity. What kind of formidable spiritual realm was this? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal felt that he was completely out of his league. When Little Silver went upstairs, he found that Dog 2 was already waiting for him. Master was reading at his desk, and Little Silver didn't dare disturb him at all, because Loopy Toad had already told him earlier that it was a taboo to disturb Master when he was reading or revising. Little Silver was a little disappointed in his heart. He had brought his collar and leash, but given the current situation, he couldn't use them at all. It looked like he would have to look for an opportunity later. Dog 2 made a silencing gesture with its paw, then wagged its tail and led Little Silver to the bathroom. Because it had already used Lord Ma once before, Dog 2 was already very familiar with how to activate Lord Ma. Since Wang Ling had been there once before, Lord Ma had already recorded Drought Star's coordinates. This time, when Loopy Toad went over again, Lord Ma could also teleport immediately. When Little Silver followed Dog 2 over and saw the toilet lid slowly open, he had an indescribably shocked expression on his face. "Is this Master's enlightened toilet monster?" "Loopy Toad, Lord Ma, Loopy Toad. You have to call me Lord Ma." "Little Silver, do I need to do anything during the teleportation? Do you want to drink water?" Lord Ma almost fainted when he heard this. They were both contract beasts. Why was this holy beast so stupid? Loopy Toad. "No need, just wait for the transmission. A golden teleportation light will fall on your head later." Little Silver nodded his head. "Is that so?" Little Silver had actually seen a lot of teleportation magic artifacts before, but most of them had built-in arrays. However, Little Silver didn't see the slightest trace of an array on Lord Ma. Little Silver was very surprised by this. At that moment, on Drought Star on the other side, Immortal Jinyuan was already halfway through his planet's restoration work. Although Wind Spirit had been the cause of such massive damage, Immortal Jinyuan was now using the primordial chi stored in the Heart Demon Stone to repair the planet. Not only was he atoning for his own carelessness in creating the Heart Demon Wind Spirit back then, he was also washing away Wind Spirit's sins. Fortunately, the formation of the inner demon was still in the middle stage. Before it completely devoured the main body, it couldn't be too far away from the main body. Thus, Immortal Jinyuan had always been trying his best to stay away from the human world to prevent the inner demons from plotting against him and committing an unforgivable crime of murder. But in the last few thousand years, because Wind Spirit had used the gate between worlds without permission, there had been a misunderstanding between the demon world and the human world, which had resulted in huge losses for both sides. Immortal Jinyuan had already thought of a way to make up for this. He was going to contact the human cultivators after Drought Star was repaired and donated to them. He hoped that Drought Star would become the first third planet suitable for both the human world and the demon world to live in peace. Immortal Jinyuan wiped at his sweat and floated in the air as he looked at the progress of Drought Star's restoration. Drought Star's surface was now basically complete. Furthermore, Immortal Jinyuan had repaired the dry and cracked land that had been lacking water to begin with. It was as if he had added a layer of abrasion to it. Furthermore, while the restoration work had been carried out, Immortal Jinyuan hadn't forgotten to set up a water magic array in the drier areas on Drought Star's surface to ensure that the land here was moist enough. Immortal Jinyuan had been busy these days repairing the Earth's surface and building a more stable ecological environment at the same time. Hands on his hips, Immortal Jinyuan nodded in satisfaction. Now, the only thing left is to repair the space cracks. That was because the space cracks caused by the collisions of high-level spells had been torn apart. This was a more troublesome restoration project than repairing the Earth. Thus, Immortal Jinyuan planned to carry out a unified treatment after the land was completely repaired. The space cracks on Drought Star were actually not as bad as in the demon world. Although space repairs were a little complicated, Immortal Jinyuan estimated that he would be able to finish them in about a month. Immortal Jinyuan took out a map which he had drawn when he had been repairing Drought Star's surface. He had already marked out all the places where space cracks had appeared. Let's start with the place closest to us. Immortal Jinyuan sighed, and after confirming the nearest repair target, he directly flew over. But Immortal Jinyuan frowned at the scene in front of him because he realized that there were actually two openings in this space. If there were two openings, he would have marked them on the map back then. Is this a new crack? Chin in hand, Immortal Jinyuan frowned slightly as he gazed at the crack. Just as he was about to go forward to take a look, his entire body jerked, and he immediately fell back. Even the expression on his face changed. He sensed a strange aura. There was an indescribable smell of danger coming from the space crack in front of him. What's that? Immortal Jinyuan frowned because the smell coming from the space crack didn't smell like demon chi or spirit chi. Instead, it was a little like the primordial chi, which he didn't have much left in his body at the moment. Could it be? Immortal Jinyuan frowned as he muttered to himself. He thought of one possibility, which was what second-generation demon saint had described previously in the holy palace of the demon world, which was a vicious beast-level monster that had poured out of a mysterious space crack. Immortal Jinyuan thought of himself as a more meticulous person. If he had known that there were two space rifts here when he had drawn the map back then, there was no way he would have just marked one on the map. This strange space rift was new, and there was an extremely dangerous aura inside it. Chapter 640. This was a Kuin, a giant Kuin. Furthermore, unlike the species he had seen above the demon world's holy palace before, this was a scavenger Kuin with an extremely foul stench all over its body, like a rotting corpse soaked in stinky mud. The smell was extremely pungent. This could already be called a biochemical weapon. Frowning, Immortal Jinyuan used spirit energy to seal off his nose to temporarily numb his sense of smell. Otherwise, he felt that he really would pass out from the stench. If this was the case for a grand venerated immortal, then there was no need to mention other people. The current situation was almost exactly the same as what second-generation Demon Saint had described back then. An inexplicable crack in space, and then a primordial ferocious beast that used primordial chi as its main source of energy. So the question at hand was, where did this ferocious beast come from? How annoying. I'm afraid I'll have to mend the ground again after I've already patched it up. Immortal Jin Yuan sighed in his heart. He clenched his fists and completely concealed his aura, concealing himself in a way that would disguise himself first. This scavenger Kuan wasn't big, but it was still a little bigger than the corpse he had seen in Demon Saint's holy palace back then. It wasn't a baby Kuan, but a child Kuan whose spiritual intelligence hadn't fully developed yet. Although the other party had already sensed his aura, as long as Immortal Jin Yuan didn't alert it, he probably wouldn't provoke it. Even so, this scavenger Kuan's senses were beyond Immortal Jin Yuan's imagination. Even though Immortal Jin Yuan had concealed his aura, this scavenger Kuan actually didn't seem to lose its direction. Immortal Jin Yuan changed his position several times in a row, and the scavenger Kuan also followed suit, its head always aimed in his direction. Was this Kuan using its head as a sensing device? Or was someone controlling this scavenger Kuan's movements from behind the scenes? Immortal Jin Yuan remembered that in Demon Saint's holy palace, there had been a broken fishing line on the belly of that baby multi-fanged Kuan. If this fishing line could be used to conduct and control the Kuan like a marionette, then the current situation was a lot more complicated than Immortal Jin Yuan had imagined. Immortal puppet, open. Thinking this, Immortal Jin Yuan didn't hesitate to open his immortal eye. Light gathered in his orange pupils before finally blossoming. In that instant, it was as if time had slowed down and everything in the world had slowed down. With Immortal Jin Yuan at its center, a faint immortal chi spread out, causing his beautiful red hair to sway slightly. The immortal puppet's power searched the scavenger Kuan's body from top to bottom. Soon his eyes trembled. Blade, come. Immortal Jinin raised his hand, and several streaks of red light swiftly flew out of his cuffs. He had never taken out his life-bonded magic weapon before, because he didn't think it was necessary. But now, in the face of such a ferocious prehistoric vicious beast, Immortal Jin Yuan wouldn't hold anything back, because the slightest carelessness could really endanger his life. These streaks of red light formed a disc in front of Immortal Jin Yuan, and finally joined together to form a blade wheel with 8 openings. When a cultivator reached a certain realm, they would have their own life-bonded magic weapon, which was usually a first-class holy weapon or a world-defying magic weapon. The red blade wheel that Immortal Jin Yuan had summoned now was a world-defying magic weapon that had been forged after being fed with his own blood for 100 years. Red Moon Blade Wheel. Red Moon Blade had 2 forms. When split, it could be used independently as an 8-sided scimitar for all kinds of miraculous attacks, which was more flexible. The second form, which was the wheel attack in its current combined form, was even more destructive. Currently, Immortal Jin Yuan didn't know what kind of material this fishing line was made of. But what was certain was that this fishing line could actually penetrate space and wasn't corroded by the power of chaos in the space. Attacking purely in its first form, it definitely wouldn't be able to cut the fishing line. Red Moon Blade Wheel was extremely destructive. When all was said and done, it was a world-defying magic weapon. As it flew over, its powerful blade cut through the air and distorted space. The pressure from Red Moon Blade Wheel was so strong that the ground couldn't withstand it and started to crack. Jin Yuan's heart was bleeding. This was the ground he had just restored. But in this situation, he had to sacrifice the child to catch the wolf. If he didn't stop this scavenger Kuan, it would definitely cause even more serious damage to Drought Star. Clang! Red Moon Blade Wheel collided with the fishing line, and there was the dull sound of metal striking metal. Immortal Jin Yuan could faintly see sparks from the friction between the blade wheel and the fishing line. I have to work harder. Immortal Jin Yuan's fiery red Taoist robe flapped in the air as he manipulated Red Moon blade wheel to spin at high speed. The powerful blade scraped against this fishing line of unknown material, and there was an ear-piercing sound. Since Wind Spirit's disappearance, Immortal Jin Yuan had never used his strength like this before. He did his best to make Red Moon blade wheel spin at its fastest speed. It should work. Immortal Jin Yuan furrowed his brow. At the same time, the scavenger Kuan on the ground shrieked as the Red Moon blade disc spun. It was as if the fishing line was connected to its nerves. When the fishing line collided with the Red Moon blade disc, the scavenger Kuan sank into madness and looked to be in extreme pain. Very soon, there was a crisp sound. It was the sound of the fishing line snapping success. Immortal Jin Yuan was delighted. But the moment the fishing line snapped, the scavenger Kuan started to uncontrollably spit out purple-black rotting liquid onto the ground. Fortunately, this was just a child Kuan and wasn't very big. It was only a dozen or so meters long. If it had been an adult giant Kuan, its wingspan would have been more than 10,000 feet, and Immortal Jin Yuan felt that it would have been very difficult for him to withstand such a vicious creature. Immortal Jin Yuan wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he carefully observed the Kuan in the air for a while, and finally concluded that this scavenger Kuan spitting out rotting liquid was a stress reaction to the fishing line snapping, like a person vomiting Karsic. After the line on its back was cut, this child Kuan looked much less ferocious, and its perception wasn't as strong as it had been when it first appeared. Now that Immortal Jin Yuan was a little stealthy, the other party was already unable to detect him. It seemed that baby Kuan and child Kuan indeed didn't have the ability to attack on their own. Immortal Jin Yuan had been wondering this when he had seen the baby multi-fang Kuan in Demon Saint's Holy Palace, but now it seemed that he had an explanation. Whether it was a baby Kuan or a child Kuan, although they had the ability to attack, these prehistoric vicious beasts generally wouldn't take the initiative to attack at this stage. Vicious beasts learned their attack skills from their parents as they grew older. At this stage, they still needed enough nutrients to grow, and attacking would usually affect their development. Chapter 641. After spitting out the acid, the scavenger Kuan gradually calmed down. The puppet technique was an evil technique that was absolutely forbidden among human cultivators. This was because the principle behind the puppet technique was very malicious. What it consumed wasn't the energy of the caster, but the energy of the victim. The victim of the puppet technique would continuously produce energy at the cost of their lifespan until they ran dry. Thousands of years ago, when this spell had just become popular, the victims would eventually be completely drained of their energy by the caster before they slowly withered away and died. But the caster would be completely unscathed. Immortal Jin Yuan wasn't sure whether the puppet spell was controlling this scavenger Kuan's movements, but he was sure that the principle behind this spell was similar to the puppet spell. While Immortal Jin Yuan was pondering this, a golden light suddenly appeared in the sky, and Loopy Toad and Little Silver descended abruptly, both wrapped in the golden light shield that Wang Ling had cast on them. After Dog 2's trip to the demon world last time, Wang Ling had reconfigured Lord Ma. From now on, everyone who was teleported through Lord Ma would have their own golden light shield on them, except for those who had been washed away by Lord Ma. Loopy Toad and Little Silver landed in front of the giant scavenger Kuan's corpse. "Senior Dog, why are you here?" Immortal Jin Yuan was pleasantly surprised. Dog 2 stared at the scavenger Kuan, which looked like it had already fallen asleep on the ground, and its heart was also shaken. In the end, it was still a step too late. But Jin Yuan didn't seem to be in any serious trouble, so the situation wasn't too bad. "I predicted that the angler might make a move on you, so I decided to come and take a look." Loopy Toad nodded and suppressed the shock in its heart as it put on an expression as if it knew everything. "Also, I specially made a weapon for you." After saying that, Loopy Toad raised the corner of its eye and motioned for Little Silver to hand over the 3 views shattering hammer. Everything had been said and done beforehand. When Little Silver handed over the hammer, he looked Immortal Jin Yuan up and down with a very strange expression. Was this immortal Jinyuan, a legendary human cultivator in the world today? Little Silver didn't think this red-haired young man in front of him was very powerful. In any case, he was definitely far inferior to Master. Otherwise, how could he not even be able to tell that this dog two next to him was pretending to be a senior? Senior dog, who is this lovely girl? Immortal Jinyuan looked at Little Silver. Little Silver, butt-face replied, "He's my servant. I'm used to taking him out for a walk. It just so happened that I happened to meet him today, so I brought him along for a walk." Little Silver, butt-face asked, "Did you see the collar around his neck?" Little Silver, holy shit, he had actually dug his own grave. I see. Immortal Jinyuan had a look of sudden realization on his face. He had thought it was a little strange that this girl had a collar around her neck, but after Dog 2's explanation, Immortal Jinyuan completely understood. Immortal Jinyuan scratched the back of his head and couldn't help praising it. As expected of Senior Dog, I've always seen people walk their dogs, but this is the first time I've seen a dog walk a person. Although it was his first time, Jinyuan didn't find it strange at all. In the cultivation world, strength was always king. Cultivators would choose to rear spirit beasts as pets, but there was no rule stating that some powerful spirit beasts could not sign some labor contracts to hire cultivators. It was very normal for a senior with Senior Dog's realm to have a few human servants, okay? Although Jinyuan felt that the aura of this fair-faced girl in front of him didn't smell like that of a human, let alone a spirit beast, but Jinyuan didn't dare ask too many questions. After all, this was their first time meeting, and in front of Senior Dog at that. Asking too many questions would be a little rude. Has it stopped? Loopy Toad looked at the behemoth in front of it and asked about the situation. Yes, Senior Dog. This space fissure formed not long ago, and I only noticed it when I was about to mend it. Originally, he wanted to block the crack, and then this ferocious creature would come out from inside. It was the same as when I went to Demon Saint's Holy Palace last time. There was a fishing line in this creature's belly, and I cut it off with my life-bonded magic weapon, Red Moon Blade Disc, Immortal Jinyuan said in full detail. As he spoke, a reddish-gold blade, disc the size of a millstone, slowly spun behind him. This was Loopy Toad's first time seeing Immortal Jinyuan's life-bonded magic weapon. In fact, this millstone-sized Red Moon Blade Disc was just a miniature version, and Immortal Jinyuan's life-bonded magic weapon could freely shrink or shrink. Is there a severed line? Little Silver was very curious. Part of it is still attached to that evil creature's body, and the rest has already been swallowed up by the space fissure. It should have been recycled. I think it's a puppet spell, but I don't think so. If it's just a simple puppet spell, it would be a little difficult to control such a behemoth. Immortal Jinyuan cupped his chin and looked at Loopy Toad. Does Senior Dog know what spell this is? Loopy Toad pretended to be profound. Of course I know. On the side, Little Silver looked like he was watching a good show. Dog 2's act had gone overboard, and Little Silver wanted to see what it had to say. Loopy Toad, I know, but there's no need to say it in person. My servant, Little Silver, will handle this matter. Little Silver, F***KU. Teacher Little Silver, what do you think? Immortal Jinyuan asked very cautiously, and even used honorifics. Although this Miss Little Silver was indeed Senior Dog's servant, what was Senior Dog's identity? Even if Miss Little Silver was a servant, her identity wasn't something he could touch. That was because holy beasts and vicious beasts were inseparable enemies to begin with. Although Little Silver hadn't had much contact with vicious beasts, he had come into contact with them at a very young age. That was before holy beasts had gone extinct and before Dog Saint had been made into a hot pot. Everything had been pretty wonderful. Little Silver frowned as he looked at the scavenger coin, which seemed to have already fallen asleep. Was it a puppet spell that shouldn't be possible? The puppet spell usually controlled targets that weren't too big. Thousands of years ago, people who had mastered this spell knew how to apply the 100 puppets demonstration technique, which meant that they could control over 100 puppets at the same time. But in the end, these puppets were very small. It would be very difficult to control such a huge vicious beast with the puppet spell alone. It's the puppet goose spell. Little Silver suddenly raised his head and said, Chapter 642. It's not the puppet spell, it's the puppet goose spell. Realization dawned on Immortal Jinyuan's face, and his admiration for Senior Dog instantly rose again. The ground began to roll up and down like the billowing waves. In the end, this was Senior Dog. Even a servant under him could instantly see through the trick. Why hadn't he thought of it? Indeed, if it was the puppet goose spell, which was even more sinister than the puppet spell, controlling such a vicious creature would no longer be nonsense. The puppet voodoo technique was a technique that was based on the puppet voodoo technique and enhanced by the voodoo technique. Unlike the puppet spell, which used strings and spells to control puppets, the puppet goo spell required a goo to be planted in the body of the person under the spell, and the power of the goo poison combined with the strings and spells to strengthen the entire puppet spell. To control such an enormous vicious creature, the goo insect inside its body had to be terrifyingly large. Immortal Jinyan opened his immortal eye, and a beam of spirit light shot out to penetrate the surface of the scavenger Kuin's skin to see inside its body. But very quickly, he withdrew his immortal eye. This method didn't work. Like the baby multi-fanged Kuin, this scavenger Kuin's main energy source was primordial chi. Since the primordial chi covered its body, the immortal eye, which used spirit energy as its main energy source, couldn't penetrate the Kuin's skin at all. As expected, it doesn't work. Immortal Jinyuan sighed. The concentration of primordial chi in his body was still too low. Little Silver licked his lips. Should I cut it open and take a look? Immortal Jinyuan suddenly felt that this Miss Little Silver was a little scary. Cut it open. How could it be so easy? He had used Red Moon Blade Disc to cut the fishing line on the back of this vicious creature, and part of the disc blade had scraped the surface of the scavenger Kuin's skin, but this seemingly soft skin was actually so hard that it couldn't be broken. His Red Moon Blade Disc was a world-defying magic weapon. It wasn't a high-level world-defying magic weapon, and had just reached 8th class. However, an 8th grade world-defying celestial device, which was also his natal magic weapon, could definitely destroy the celestial body of a genuine immortal in terms of the damage it could inflict on the celestial body. However, even such a magical artifact could do nothing against this primordial vicious beast. This monster is not moving now. Let's find a way to block the crack first. Immortal Jinyuan frowned slightly. Worried that something unforeseen might happen, he wanted to be the first to block that unusual space fissure. However, just as he was about to make a move, an extremely ferocious pressure came from the spatial rift. Senior Dog, something else is coming out. Immortal Jinyuan had a bad feeling in his heart. Loopy Toad and Little Silver were on guard at the same time. Because of the protective golden light around them, this pressure had a limited effect on them. But just by looking at the momentum, they knew that this fissure was probably going to spit out something incredible again. The baby multi-fanged Kuin in the Demon Saint's holy palace, and the scavenger Kuin in front of him. What would it be this time? At this moment, a strand of tension lingered in the surroundings. It's a big guy this time. Little Silver sked. Although the monster in the crack hadn't come out yet, he could already sense that it wasn't simple. This kind of pressure probably didn't belong to an adult, prehistoric, vicious beast. Let's try this hammer, Loopy Toad reminded them at that moment. They weren't flustered at all. After all, with the hammer that little Masterling had just personally forged in front of them, if they really ran into an opponent they couldn't handle, they could settle it with one blow. It was impossible to make a move. How could they beat this kind of monster? As Little Silver had guessed, it was a big guy this time. The space fissure tore open visibly and became wider than before. Then, a scavenger Kuin that reeked of decay and was even bigger than the child scavenger Kuin in front of them flew out of the fissure. This scavenger Kuin was more than 10 times the size of the one on the ground. It flew out of the fissure like an aircraft carrier, and its huge shadow directly covered Loopy Toad's astonished face. Furthermore, this was just the upper half of its body. The other half was still in the space fissure. This thing was way too big. Immortal Jin Yuan was greatly alarmed. It really is an adult scavenger coin, but this size means that it has just reached adulthood. A real adult scavenger coin is even bigger. Little Silver's expression was as calm as an ancient well. Although this vicious beast was big, it didn't scare him at all. Back then, Dog Saint's double sizing had been even bigger. If it wasn't for those cultivators carelessly drugging Dog Saint, making him unable to use double sizing and turning him into a spicy hot pot stew, the Holy Dog clan wouldn't have been completely wiped out. Immortal Jin Yuan, Loopy Toad, and Little Silver scattered on the spot and retreated a little. To their surprise, this adult scavenger coin didn't seem to have any intention of attacking. Instead, it directly opened its mouth wide and made a swallowing motion at the child scavenger coin on the ground. It looks like the angler wants to use this adult scavenger coin to swallow the child scavenger coin on the ground and take it back. Immortal Jin Yuan figure out the intention of the person behind the scenes. Since that's the case, we can't let him succeed, Loopy Toad said with a frown. The angler's action of choosing to take it back rather than attack was enough to prove that there was a secret inside the child scavenger coin on the ground that the angler didn't want them to know. As for what secret this child scavenger coin was hiding, they would only find out after it was cut open. Senior, don't do anything. Leave it to me. After saying that, Immortal Jin Yuan was the first to rush forward. Loopy Toad. All right. Red Moon Blade Disc's attack had already been quite weak against the child scavenger coin, and it was clear that it was almost impossible to cause any damage to this adult scavenger coin. All of his hopes rested on that little hammer. Immortal Jinyin gripped the hammer tightly. He had never seen this hammer before, and it didn't look very impressive. But since this hammer had been made by Senior Dog, it should be effective, right? While Immortal Jin Yuan was thinking this, he raised the pitch-black hammer and directly swung it down at the adult scavenger coin. Bang! There was the muffled sound of a collision. Immortal Jin Yuan was thrown back, but he wasn't injured. The moment he was thrown back, the adult scavenger coin, which had been hit by the hammer, suddenly roared in pain, and its swallowing motion instantly froze. The weakening effect had taken effect. Now is the time for all living things to be equal. Hurry up and attack. Dog 2 reminded him. All right, Senior. Immortal Jinyin grit his teeth and operated Red Moon Blade Disc again. Chapter 643. Red Moon Blade Disc was like a gear, and as Immortal Jin Yuan cast a spell, it grew in size as it moved, its blade piercing through the heavens. When a world-defying magic weapon truly unleashed its power, it undoubtedly had earth-shattering destructive power. Red Moon Blade Disc cut into the weakened body of the adult scavenger coin inch by inch, causing massive amounts of blood to gush out of the wound. The corrosive blood flowed out very slowly like magma, and the moment it touched the ground, it corroded into the earth and burned up thick smoke. Loopy Toad and Little Silver sealed their nose orifices. The smell was too horrible, and if they didn't cut off their sense of smell, they would probably die here. It really works. Immortal Jin Yuan was delighted in his heart. This hammer was too useful. In the end, it was Senior Dog who could actually create such a powerful limited-use magic weapon. It could only be used 10 times in total, so he had to use it sparingly. The adult scavenger coin let out a pained cry, and the mysterious angler on the other end of the crack seemed to sense something. Under the angler's control, the upper body of the adult scavenger coin, which had just poked out of the crack, actually started to shrink back. Want to leave? Not so easy. Jin Yuan grit his teeth and operated Red Moon Blade Disc with all his might. In a flash, the disc expanded by several hundred inches and directly cut off the upper body of the adult scavenger coin along with the fishing line on it. Men, the moment the scavenger coin's body fell, Immortal Jin Yuan directly used the Heart Demon Stone as an energy source to directly extract primordial chi from it and used the Skymen Stone to plug the crack. The Skyman stone was a synthetic cultivation industrial material used to repair space cracks. It was very expensive, but it was very effective in mending space. But the moment Loopy Toad saw Immortal Genuine take out the Skyman stone, its heart was still shaken. This Skyman stone could probably buy 5 houses in Jinghua. When all was said and done, this was a legendary cultivation big shot. Loopy Toad had simply been caught off guard when he took out such an expensive stone. After mending the abnormal space crack, Immortal Genuine breathed a sigh of relief. Previously, he had wanted to conserve the vital energy stored in the demonic heartstone and use his spiritual power to activate the divine mending stone to repair it. Although he could successfully repair it, it was rather time-consuming. Now that it used the origin true chi as its main energy source, the heaven mending stone actually blocked the crack in space in an instant. Genuine hadn't noticed it before because he hadn't had a comparison. Now that he did, he realized that the gap between spirit energy and primordial chi was indeed a little big. Immortal Genuine looked at the half of the adult scavenger Kuin's corpse. Just as he was about to lean over to take a look, this half of the body actually directly turned into a puddle of rotten mud on the spot, corroding a huge hole in the ground. Not dead. Immortal Genuine frowned. This is a primordial vicious beast. How can it die so easily? Little Silver said from the side. The difference between holy beasts and ferocious beasts was like the two extremes of yang and yin. Holy beasts focused on intelligence, while ferocious beasts focused on strength. However, if they both developed to the later stages, the strength of the two would actually be about the same. The only difference in the early stages would be the direction of the growth of their attribute points. Thus, ferocious beasts had extremely strong regenerative abilities. Even if half of their bodies were cut off, they could still survive as long as their core wasn't damaged. It was even more difficult to find the core in such a huge ferocious beast. A ferocious beast's core was very small, like a grain of millet. In a normal situation, it would already be very difficult for someone to fight a ferocious beast for the first time, and they wouldn't be able to care about looking for the core at all. Little Silver stared at the puddle of rotten flesh in front of him and sighed in his heart. If it was Master, killing such a ferocious beast should be as easy as turning over his hand, right? Little Silver couldn't help recalling the first time he had fought Master. At that time, Master had still been wearing a sports coat, and he had very handsomely raised his hand to slap Little Silver in his beast form and sent Little Silver flying with one slap. At that time, Little Silver vividly remembered how he had felt. He hadn't felt angry, nor had he felt the slightest bit of pain. Instead, after being slapped, he had felt a sense of excitement, as if he had indulged in a powerful, oppressive force. Now that Little Silver thought about it carefully, perhaps from that time on, he had already believed from the bottom of his heart that Wang Ling was his master. Thinking this, Little Silver still felt a little regretful in his heart. Who knew when Master would be able to hit him again? The adult scavenger Kuin fled, leaving behind this child scavenger Kuin that had already broken free of control. The child scavenger Kuin itself wasn't aggressive unless there was someone controlling it from behind. Now, the fishing line on this scavenger Kuin had already been cut, and it lay motionless on the ground. The 3 view-shattering hammer's weakening ability was a group attack that could forcibly weaken any hostile enemy. While this weakened state hadn't completely disappeared, Immortal Genuine continued to use Red Moon Blade Disc, intending to cut open this scavenger Kuin's body layer by layer to see what on earth was inside. Since he couldn't find the core, he just had to continue to cause damage to this scavenger Kuin. Furthermore, the recovery ability of a child scavenger Kuin wasn't as good as that of an adult scavenger Kuin. In this weakened state of all creatures are equal, Immortal Genuine felt that everything was now completely under his control. Let me see what on earth is inside this vicious creature of yours. Immortal Genuine's eyebrows furrowed into a small knot. Then, he carefully manipulated Red Moon Blade Disc to make precise cuts. The scavenger Kuin roared in pain and tried to flee, but immortal Jinyuan raised his hand and nailed it to the ground with a golden light. Loopy Toad's heart shook as it sighed at how amazing little Master Ling's little hammer was. This kind of weakening was just too sick. In this weakened state, whether it was a child scavenger koan or an adult scavenger koan, neither had the ability to resist. This thing had rough skin and thick flesh, and now that Red Moon Blade Disc continued to cut it open, the first layer of skin was finally completely peeled off. Jinyuan and Loopy Toad had thought that they would find a goo insect or something inside its body, but in the end, they were greatly astonished by what they saw. Inside this child scavenger koan, there was actually another scavenger koan wrapped up inside it. Immortal Jinyuan, Loopy Toad, Little Silver, to refine an even smaller koan into a goo insect, and then use the puppet goo spell to attach the goo insect to another koan. What kind of operation was this, Senior Dog? Let me try again. Jinyuan was a little dumbfounded, and then continued to operate the blade disc to remove the second layer of skin of this koan. Although it was a little hard to believe, they had indeed seen it. Inside this second koan, hidden inside the body, there was actually a third koan. Chapter 644. There were 3 baby koan inside this child koan's body, each smaller than the last. Little Silver couldn't help recalling a web game he had played called Big Fish Eats Small Fish, refining an even smaller koan into a goo worm, and then using the puppet goo spell to plant the goo worm inside the smaller koan to parasitize it. Immortal Jinyuan came up with a guess. Little Silver thought for a bit, then cupped his chin and narrowed his eyes as he said softly, "That should be the case, but this angler also used a characteristic of a vicious beast like a koan." "What characteristic?" Immortal Jinyuan asked in a low voice. "Have you ever played the Big Fish Eats Small Fish game?" Little Silver explained, "When a vicious beast like a koan is in danger, it has a unique way of strengthening itself, and that is to devour smaller koan to strengthen itself. This is my first time seeing this, but my grandfather mentioned it to me when I was in the clan, so it definitely isn't fake." Hearing this, Immortal Jinyuan and Loopy Toad both understood. Planting a goo worm inside an adult koan was obviously as difficult as ascending to heaven, but it was very easy to plant it in a baby koan that had just been born and wasn't too big. Coupled with the koan's characteristic of the big swallowing the small to strengthen itself, controlling a baby koan with a goo worm was the same as controlling an even more powerful adult koan. Immortal Jinyuan couldn't help recalling the half of an adult koan that he had cut open with Red Moon Blade Disc. Although it had looked like a bloody mess, now that he thought about it carefully, when he had cut it open, the cross-section had been like a 1,000-layer cake. Immortal Jinyuan had never dealt with a vicious beast before, and had thought that this was the structure of a koan's body. Now that he thought about it, the adult koan that had survived after Immortal Jinyuan had cut off half of its body had probably swallowed several smaller koan. However, this was not the most frightening part of the story. It was actually the angler. To be able to make a prehistoric, vicious beast like a koan feel threatened, and use the big swallowing the small stress response to force itself to strengthen itself. What realm was this angler's expert realm? Immortal Jinyuan shivered. He was very glad that he had met Senior Dog. Otherwise, his encounter with a vicious beast on Drought Star this time might have ended tragically. The little hammer that Senior Dog gave him, he had to use it carefully. Immortal Jinyuan sighed in his heart. This magical little hammer was a genuine, life-saving magic treasure. Furthermore, it was all thanks to Senior Dog's divination that he would be in trouble this time, and it specially sent Little Hammer over. Otherwise, the consequences would have been really hard to predict. So even though Immortal Jinyuan was a little afraid of this mysterious unknown person, he felt inexplicably at ease when he thought about how he still had Senior Dog behind him. Since Senior Dog was able to create this magical hammer to counter, it meant that Senior Dog's strength might be on par with that mysterious angler's. The most troublesome thing right now was that they didn't know what the intentions of the mysterious angler were, nor did they know where he was. The only thing they knew was that it wouldn't be easy for the mysterious angler to tear open the spatial wall and let the Kuin fly over. That was because every time a special spatial crack was formed, it would be a true disaster if it was formed on a large scale. All in all, Immortal Jinyuan felt that this situation where they were out in the open and the enemy in the dark was actually very disadvantageous to them. The situation could be said to be a blur, and there was next to no information on the angler. But now, it wasn't that they didn't have any clues. Immortal Jinyuan stared at the already imprisoned baby Kuin on the ground, and an idea stirred in his heart. "Senior dog, do you want to cut it down again?" Immortal Jinyuan asked. What was in front of them now was the second baby Kuin that this child Kuin had swallowed. "Keep cutting," Dog 2 said in a low voice. Actually, it was also very curious about how many more layers there were inside. "Very well, Senior," Immortal Jinyuan replied very politely. He concentrated on manipulating Red Moon Blade Disc and adjusting its size. The young Kuin inside were now getting smaller and smaller, so he had to be extra careful when cutting them. If the baby Kuin in the innermost layer really did contain a goo insect, then he would have to be even more cautious. The origin of the goo worm could be one of the important clues that could control the mysterious angler at present, because there weren't many cultivators who knew how to use goo to begin with, and among this small group of cultivators, there was actually someone who knew how to use a powerful goo to control a primordial vicious beast. The number of people who were on the list in history could be counted on one's fingers. In fact, there was another clue. It was Little Silver's holy beast blood tracking spell. When the mysterious angler had retrieved the adult Kuin earlier, Little Silver had already left a few drops of his own blood on the Kuin. If this adult Kuin could finally return to the angler's side smoothly, Little Silver would be able to use the tracking spell to determine the angler's approximate location. It was just that this was a private mission that Little Master Ling had assigned them, so Dog 2 and Little Silver kept it to themselves and didn't directly say it out loud. "I'm going to cut it." At that moment, Immortal Jinyuan felt like a surgeon in an operating theater who was about to operate on a patient, and he was especially nervous. But at the same time, there was a faint sense of excitement, as if he were about to open an express delivery. Hovering in the air, Immortal Jinyuan slowly lowered the Red Moon Blade Disc and started to cut open the skin of the second baby Kuin in his body. This scene gave off a chainsaw déjà vu. Little Silver had finished watching this movie not long ago, and for some reason, he felt that it was very tasty. Seeing this, Little Silver rubbed his belly. It was a pity that he had been on a diet recently, so he rarely ordered takeout. He planned to eat broccoli with grenade-throwing Senior Immortal for a while. But looking at this scene in front of him, he suddenly wanted to eat Midnight Dining Hall's red braised food. Boss Tan Siming and grenade-throwing Senior Immortal were friends, and each time grenade-throwing Senior Immortal placed an order, Tan Siming would give grenade-throwing Senior Immortal discounts and red packets. He was a very enthusiastic boss. Red Moon Blade Disc spun, and as blood gushed out of the second baby Kuin, the surface of its skin was cut open perfectly. This cut was perfect and didn't touch the baby Kuin's internal organs. Dog 2 and Little Silver stepped forward to take a look, and the scene in front of them was beyond their expectations. Because what was inside this baby Kuin wasn't a Kuin. It was a living person. Chapter 645. A Kuin's stomach was big enough to begin with, and even a baby Kuin could swallow a wanxiang. Once its stomach was cut open, it wouldn't be strange for any kind of creature to spill out. But the girl in front of them wasn't in the Kuin's stomach, but was lying quietly on it like a curled-up baby, hugging its knees as it slept. This was a girl with long blue hair. Half of her face was covered by her hair, but it couldn't hide her beauty. Unexpectedly, the girl was actually very clean from head to toe. Even her face was the same, without the slightest trace of blood. They were all repelled by a layer of dim blue light, and this light came from the simple and crude gray ancient clothes she was wearing. This was an extremely corrosive scavenger Kuin, and every part of its body had a strong corrosive nature. The reason why this girl could lie here so peacefully was all thanks to the protection of the magic light emitted by the gray ancient clothes. What's this girl's background? Immortal Jin Yuan was stupefied. He had never expected to actually dig out a girl from inside a koan, and a beautiful girl at that. What should we do, senior dog? Immortal Jin used his magic power to draw the girl out and put her steadily on the ground before using the immortal eye to conduct a detailed examination. He didn't have any other intentions. He just wanted to check if the girl was injured. This girl was indeed very beautiful, with an incomparably otherworldly beauty that didn't belong to this world, as if she didn't belong to the common populace. In some sense, Loopy Toad felt that this girl's temperament was very similar to Little Master Ling's. How is it? Do you want me to feed her holy beast blood? Little Silver asked on the side, his hands on his knees. Not for now. This girl's vital signs are stable. She's just in a coma for some unknown reason. Immortal Jin Yuan cupped his chin in his hand as he answered. He then raised his head and gave Little Silver a very strange look. Only then did he realize Little Silver's identity with amazement. Miss Little Silver, so you're a holy beast? You just realized? Little Silver sighed in his heart. He felt that this legendary cultivator really wasn't much. He actually only realized it now. Immortal Jin Yuan smiled foolishly. Oh, Miss Little Silver, don't take offense. I've always been slow on the uptake. I felt that Miss Little Silver's aura was a little strange. It didn't feel like a spirit beast, demon beast, or magical beast, let alone a human. I completely overlooked a holy beast. I've always wondered if Miss Little Silver was an alien. Little Silver X. Alien. Although this answer sounded a little heart-wrenching, Little Silver had to admit that after the extinction of holy beasts, most human cultivators' memories of them had begun to fade. There were only two major historical effects of the extinction of holy beasts. The first was the establishment of an annual Spirit Beast Protection Day, and the other effect was to stimulate the local dog meat hot pot culture. This was all thanks to the dog saint. However, the dog meat used in the dog hot pot culture in those regions was provided through legal channels, and the type of dog used was a type of meat dog that was specially eaten, similar to the dragon pork that Jai Yin often used to fry pork chops for Wang Ming. To be honest, Little Silver really wanted to eat it when he was free, because it was said that the base for the dog meat hot pot in that region was an exclusive secret recipe based on what Dog Saint had been cooked back then. When he had watched Dog Saint being cooked back then, Little Silver remembered curling up in the dog clan's depository of Buddhist texts with an incomparably terrified expression on his face and an uncontrollable drool. To this day, he still couldn't forget the aroma of the spicy hot pot. We'll take this girl back first. I'll leave the rest to you. Loopy Toad stared at the sleeping girl for a long time before it finally made a decision. Because judging from the style of the gray ancient clothes she was wearing, it could tell that she wasn't an ordinary person. Leaving her here wouldn't be of any use. It would be better to take her back first and see if Little Master Ling had any way to wake her up. All right, senior dog, don't worry. Leave this to me. I've already taken control of this vicious creature. I'll find its core later and get rid of it once and for all. Immortal Jin Yuan patted his chest and laughed. All right, Loopy Toad nodded. If the hammer is about to run out of energy, you can directly summon me with your immortal talisman, and I'll come over to recharge it. Although a limited-use magic weapon could only be used a limited number of times, it could be used continuously as long as it didn't run out of energy and was recharged in time. Thank you, senior dog. Immortal Jin Yuan nodded. Of course he knew what was at stake. This was also one of the main reasons why Immortal Jin Yuan wanted to do everything possible to save on using the hammer. Then, Dog 2 put its paw lightly on the girl's shoulder, and it and Little Silver stamped their feet, followed by a flash of golden light. Two people and one dog reappeared in front of Lord Ma. Wang Ling already knew about the situation with the girl in gray. In fact, the moment Immortal Jin Yuan had cut open the vicious beast and rescued the girl in gray from its belly, he had already texted Immortal Toya. There had to be a reason why she was in a coma. Furthermore, the girl's background was unknown, so Wang Ling didn't want to directly wake her up in his own home. He didn't know this girl at all. since her vital signs were stable and she had just fallen into an inexplicable coma. Wang Ling felt that the only thing he could do was send her to the hospital in time. He wasn't a hero, so he didn't need to show off by saving a damsel in distress. What was more, he still had to worry about the Beast King's remains summer camp in 2 days. After the summer camp, there was still the final exam. What wasn't more important than this? Thus, when Dog 2 and Little Silver brought the girl back, all Wang Ling could do was very gentlemanly place her on his bed with a traction spell. Fortunately, she was very clean and didn't need any special purification treatment. The only thing that Wang Ling was a little curious about was the gray clothes she was wearing, because they had the aura of heavenly Tao on them. Wang Ling stretched out his hand to touch the gray clothes to see what they were made of. In the end, he had just stretched out his hand when Mother Wang directly opened the door and came in. Mother Wang sucked in a breath at the scene in front of her. The girl in gray was sleeping soundly on the bed, and Ling Ling's action of reaching out to touch the hem of the clothes. What were they doing? Mother Wang covered her mouth in astonishment. Then she slammed the door shut with a bang. Wang Ling. Chapter 646. This was already the second time. What was it like to be misunderstood by your own mother for the second time? Wang Ling felt that it was as embarrassing as someone seeing you dripping yogurt on your pants while wiping it off with a tissue in the bedroom. Looking at the bedroom door, Wang Ling felt that it was time for him to enchant it as well, at the very least, add a function for protection. It wasn't that Mother Wang didn't have the habit of knocking on the door, but that sometimes when she was in a hurry to say something, she would forget to knock. It could only be said that all mothers in the world were like this. Wang Ling looked at the girl in gray on the bed, and his eyebrows furrowed into a small knot. This was because he felt that this girl in gray had a different identity from a human cultivator. He had touched the material of this gray robe, but he couldn't tell what it was at all. In that case, there were 2 possibilities. First, the material of the gray robe came from outside the Milky Way, and it belonged to an alien material outside the Milky Way. Or, it was an extinct resource from the primordial era. In both cases, there was only one way for Wang Ling to learn about the material, and that was to set up an array to summon the heavenly Tao for information. Was he going to deliver crispy noodle snacks again? Speaking of which, it seemed that the box of toasted, gluten-flavored crispy noodle snacks, which he had specially ordered, was already on its way. Wang Ling frowned and sighed in his heart. Heavenly Tao. It was July 22nd on Saturday in the 13th week of the semester. It was already the next morning when Immortal Toya arrived. He had already planned to set off from Chrysanthemum Island last night. After all, it was Ling Jinren's order, and he didn't dare slight it at all. In the end, he just happened to run into his 2 disciples, Jin Shi and Yin Shi's extracurricular cram school seminar. Jin Shi and Yin Shi had come to the island and been taken in as disciples by Immortal Toya. After personally training them, their damaged spirit roots had already been completely repaired. During their 13 years on the island, the siblings had learned a lot of knowledge and principles from Immortal Toya, but being out of touch with the secular world for a long time was definitely not good. Jin Shi and Yin Shi were still very young, so Immortal Toya planned to help them find a cram school in the city while they were still able to absorb new things fairly quickly, so that they could interact more with the children in the city. The times were developing, and technology was advancing. In this era, even the models of alchemy furnaces were advancing day by day. There were even people who used hot pots to refine pills. This was a newly developed automatic hot pot alchemy furnace, which Immortal Toya had only recently seen. You just needed to plug in the electricity, mix the ingredients according to the proportion, and stew them in one pot. It was super convenient. The scariest thing was that this type of alchemy furnace was invented by a university student. Later, someone bought out the patent and became rich. It could only be said that there would always be talented people in every generation. Young people's thoughts were always novel and unique. Immortal Toya had always been very confident in Jin Shi and Yin Shi's talents. Therefore, he planned to let the two siblings go to the city to gain some experience. The times had indeed changed. Immortal Toya couldn't help feeling a little emotional. A long time ago, it was the city kids who went deep into the countryside to gain experience. Now, it was obviously not a wise choice to be out of step with the times. Children in the countryside had to think of ways to get in touch with life in the city. Chrysanthemum Island actually had a lot of advanced technology, but that was only the tip of the iceberg. Thus, Immortal Toya hadn't been able to come over right away last night because of his two precious disciples' extracurricular seminar. But he wasn't in a hurry. After all, the girl had just fallen asleep, and her life wasn't in danger. Immortal Toya's ride was a wooden carriage, which had a very special name, Wooden Ox. It sounded very slow, but in fact it wasn't slow at all. This carriage was specially customized with modern technology and could also be used for three purposes. When necessary, it could turn into a machine-operated bird to fly in the sky, a machine-operated whale to act as a submarine, or a machine-operated dolphin to act as a speedboat. I'm taking you out today because I have something to do, and I'll show you around the city. Given your temperaments, you definitely won't get into fights with other people in the city, but we Chrysanthemum Island people shouldn't be bullied, understand? When it's time to fight back, you still have to fight back. Sitting on the wooden ox, Immortal Toya reminded Jean Shur and Een Shur, who were sitting in the back, as he was about to start the vehicle. Yes, Shurfu. Jean Shur and Een Shur replied in unison. But when is the time to fight back? Immortal Toya was blank. He felt that this was a very difficult matter to define, which was why he had decided to send the siblings to the city to gain experience for a period of time. It was certainly good to be a pure and kind child nowadays, but if you wanted to survive, you would definitely suffer if you were too kind. The siblings' lives had already been very bitter. Most alchemists paid attention to the tranquility of their hearts, which meant that they wouldn't get angry easily. Jean Shur and Een Shur had been with him for many years. Although they might not have as much exposure to elixirs as the older alchemists on the market, children who had been exposed to alchemy from a young age had completely different temperaments. So, Immortal Toya's answer to the siblings' question was, if you feel angry, you can fight back. Remember not to kill them and leave them alive. That way, I can save them. Yes, Shurfu. The siblings looked at each other and smiled. While Immortal Toya was on his way to the Wang family's small villa, Wang Ling had a video call with Daoist Guang to ask him about the gray Daoist robe the girl was wearing. Daoist Guang's live streaming business had been in full swing recently, and the average number of people online had just broken the 20 million mark, bringing huge traffic to the website. When Wang Ling had looked for Daoist Guang in the morning, Daoist Guang had just been about to start a live stream. Daoist Guang looked carefully at the photo Wang Ling had sent him, and then shook his head. To tell you the truth, Senior Ling, I'm really stupid. I can't tell the origin of this gray Daoist robe at all. Daoist Guang had really examined it very carefully, although he hadn't held out much hope from the beginning. What realm was Ling Zhenren at? If he couldn't tell the origin of this Daoist robe, what could he do? He was also very desperate. Wang Ling nodded. Sure enough, in the end, he could only ask the heavenly Dao. But Senior Ling, I can't tell the origin of this Daoist robe. Does Senior know the origin of this robe I'm wearing? Daoist Guang smiled slightly and then zoomed in on the video. Only then did Wang Ling see that Daoist Guang was no longer wearing that white Daoist robe, but a full maid outfit. Wang Ling, Daoist Guang scratched his grizzled hair. This is a flag I set up a while ago when the number of viewers broke 20 million. I said that as long as it broke through, I would dress in women's clothes. Later, I used the island's resources and made up this robe based on a picture online. Nowadays, audiences' tastes are really becoming stranger and stranger. What do you think, Ling Zhenren? Wang Ling replied. Oh no, Daoist Guang. Is it the feeling of being moved? Wang Ling, the feeling of having a heart attack. Chapter 647. It could only be said that Daoist Guang was really an honest man and had very sincerely used the resources on the island to weave a very fitting set of clothes for himself. But Wang Ling really couldn't imagine what it would be like for an old man in maid's clothes to act cute in front of a mirror during a live stream and ask, "Am I beautiful?" It was a little too frightening and could shatter one's worldview to the same degree as a classic movie line. You just lost a leg, but she lost a beautiful love. But from a live streamer's point of view, Daoist Guang was a conscientious live streamer. At the very least, he hadn't reneged on his debt. It was just that Daoist Guang felt that he was going further and further down the path of live streaming, and was now on a path of no return, as he had completely forgotten about reconstructing his body. Wang Ling couldn't make a choice for Daoist Guang on this point. Everyone had the right to choose their own way of living. On the other hand, Daoist Guang now didn't have just one trick up his sleeve. As long as Daoist Guang wanted to, he could rely on selling figurines to survive the samsara spirit tribulation. When he had first started live streaming, that had just been an extravagant wish, but now it was completely achievable. It was very easy to find a group of fans among 20 million viewers who were willing to spend money on him. For example, there were still people who went to this banned live streamer Baboon every day to burn incense and give gifts to him. Wang Ling didn't know what on earth these people were thinking. Wasn't it better to save money to buy crispy noodle snacks? Holding dog twos, but Little Silver sat on the edge of the bed. They had been watching over the girl in gray all night, but she showed no signs of waking up. Where on earth had she come from? Why had she appeared in the belly of a koan? What was her background? Why had she fallen into a deep sleep? He didn't know any of this. Little Silver couldn't help thinking of Yixian, the silly girl who had saved his life back then. In order to cure Yixian's illness, Little Silver had made a deal with Immortal Mansion to serve as the master of Immortal Mansion's gatekeeper, Holy Beast, for a while in exchange for Immortal Mansion's medicinal resources. Now, Yixian was staying at Salian Jinren's place for memory rehabilitation, and she had to drink Immortal Toya's brain-strengthening medicine every day. But until now, there had been no results. When Little Silver had gone to see Yixian before, she had even forgotten his name. It wasn't that Immortal Toya's medicine wasn't effective, but that Yixian's amnesia was so severe that it was almost like the memory of a fish. Little Silver had heard that Immortal Toya had increased the dosage recently, and didn't know if Yixian was better. In Little Silver's view, Art Courtyard and this girl in gray had similar backgrounds. They were both unregistered residents. That Toya's that said, "I am Waitaya," Sheep's eyes were glued to the scene. This was Sheep's first time seeing such a mechanical vehicle. Why, Sidhat said, that Wong of said Wong, said, Sheep, said that said, Yabi said Sheep, Wong. It had been less than a month since he had last returned to the Wong family's small villa, but for some reason, Immortal Toya felt like a lifetime had passed since he came here again. He had already heard the noise in his bedroom. Standing at the window, he saw Immortal Toya standing at the door with his two disciples, who seemed to be saying something. Jin Shi and In Shi followed closely behind him. "Shifu, what's going on here? Didn't I tell you before? There's a great senior who lives here." Jin Shi and In Shi nodded. "Yes, is it the senior who eats crispy noodle snacks?" The two siblings spoke at the same time, and even their tones were exactly the same. Sheep was amazed by this scene. Immortal Toya, yes, that's him. It's not just this great senior. Everyone in this villa is a senior. You have to be polite, understand? Jin Shi and In Shi lowered their heads in thought at the same time, then looked up at the same time. Then, Shifu, can you beat this great senior? The corner of Immortal Toya's mouth twitched at this question. Of course he knew that even if there were 100 or 1,000 of him, there was no way he could beat Ling Jinren. But the problem was that he regarded Jin Shi and In Shi as his own disciples. As their Shifu, how could he admit that he wasn't as good as someone else? However, Immortal Toya didn't dare directly pat his chest and say that he was very strong. He didn't even dare say that the chances of him winning were 50-50. He could brag about it in private. But the problem was that he was at Senior Ling's doorstep. Looking around out of the corner of his eye, Immortal Toya saw a figure staring at him from the second floor. That should be Senior Ling, right? It had to be Senior Ling. He didn't even need to sense his aura to know, because Senior Ling's habit had always been to peek and observe in secret. To be honest, Wang Ling's figure at the bedroom window on the second floor gave Immortal Toya a great deal of pressure at that moment. Well, can we discuss this when we get back to the island? Is this a taboo question? Or is Shifu actually very weak? Jin Shi and Yin Shi opened their mouths again. Immortal Toya dropped his forehead deeply into his hand, feeling like his dick was hurting. If he had known earlier, he would have chosen to have Jin Shi and Yin Shi stay in the car. Initially, he had thought that since Jin Shi and Yin Shi had come to the city with great difficulty, he might as well bring them to Ling Jinren and familiarize himself with them. But who would have thought these two little bastards would start to undermine him? When all was said and done, they were country kids who had just come to the city and had a lot of questions to ask. He should have bought Jin Shi and Yin Shi a set of 100,000 Ys each before coming. The current situation could be said to be a dilemma. Immortal Toya didn't want to lose face in front of his disciples, but he also didn't want to offend Ling Jinren in front of him. Then, at this critical moment, Immortal Toya had a bright idea. He immediately took out his phone and quickly typed out a text message. Wang Ling withdrew his gaze, and sure enough, he saw that his message had arrived. Immortal Toya, Senior Ling help. Senior Ling. Wang Ling, Immortal Toya, Senior Ling. Please let me brag. Wang Ling, seeming to realize that the previous text message was a little ambiguous. Immortal Toya hurriedly typed again. Please let me brag. Wang Ling, Immortal Toya, I'll give you a crispy noodle snack branch. Chapter 650. After the medicine was dripped, Immortal Toya quietly waited for the test results. There is a Lingqing acupoint on the chest, which was the place with the densest spirit qi on the surface of a cultivator's body. Therefore, the test medicine had to be dripped on the chest, and the results would usually come out within 5 minutes. If this girl in gray was really in a coma, because of the poison, the results would be very obvious. But after 5 minutes, there was no reaction from the spot where the medicine had been dripped. Did it fail? Little Silver tilted his head. No, it's already succeeded. It's just that this girl is a little special. The qi produced by the medicine is actually transparent. Immortal Toya's expression changed to one of slight amazement. He had never seen this phenomenon before. But Immortal Toya clearly remembered that in his family's ancient ancestral texts, there was indeed a possibility that the potion might become transparent, but he had memorized it when he was very young. In addition, there had never been a situation where the potion had become transparent in the last 1,000 years. So Immortal Toya had forgotten that explanation a little and would need to review it before he would know. There's no other way. I can only take this girl back to my place first, Senior Ling, Immortal Toya sighed. Although Immortal Toya had already anticipated from the beginning that this girl of unknown origin might be in a very troublesome coma, he never thought that he might have to face an illness that he had never encountered in his many years as a doctor. After that, Immortal Toya used the guide spell to guide the girl downstairs. He carefully placed her in the front passenger seat and fastened her seatbelt. Once they arrived on Chrysanthemum Island, the girl in gray would have to face a thorough examination, both inside and out. Of course, Immortal Toya couldn't do it alone. He understood the principle that men and women shouldn't touch. He would need the cooperation of Ling Jinren, who had some medical expertise. Immortal Toya directly called Ling Jinren. Hello, Ling Jinren. I've just received a female patient from Senior Ling's family, and she's now in a deep coma. Immortal Toya gave her a rough account of his initial diagnosis. Ling Jinren, I know. It just so happens that the rehabilitation medicine you prescribed for Yuxian last time is about to run out. How about I bring her to stay on the island for a while? It just so happens that I can help you. Immortal Toya nodded. That would be great, Ling Jinren. Thank you so much, Salian Jinren said. What are you talking about? Senior Ling's business is our business. In fact, the people in the chat group already knew about the girl's background. Because of her mysterious identity and the fact that the gray-clothed girl seemed to be wearing something special, the group of people were very curious about her identity. However, it was a pity that no one was able to find out the girl's identity. They couldn't even figure out the origin of the ancient robe she was wearing. By the way, do you have a photo of this lady? Salian Jinren asked. Yes. Taoist master, please wait a moment. I will take a photo for you. Immortal Toya put down his phone, then turned on the beauty camera and took a picture of the girl's sleeping face leaning against the passenger seat at a 45-degree angle. Jinren, here's the photo. When he sent the photo, Immortal Toya couldn't help muttering to himself that this girl was beautiful. On the other side, Salian Jinren was silent for a moment when she saw the photo. Little Silver had mentioned in the group that this was a very beautiful girl, so Salian Jinren had always wanted to see how beautiful she was. It was indeed very beautiful. But, Salian Jinren, she's not bad, but there are some places where she's lacking. Immortal Toya, Jinren, what do you mean? Salian Jinren ran her fingers through her hair. Immortal, do you know the difference between the Mariana Trench and the plains? Immortal Toya, at noon, the Wong family's small villa had an extra pair of bowls and chopsticks, which had been specially prepared for Little Silver. Mother Wong had always liked Little Silver very much from the moment they met. Although she herself wasn't particularly fond of looking at a person's face, it was undeniable that good looks indeed added points. Why haven't I seen old Senior Wong lately? Little Silver sat upright at the dining table. Because Wong Ling was sitting opposite him, he was especially well-behaved with his hands on his thighs, looking very obedient. Grandpa has been cultivating in seclusion recently. Loopy Toad answered mysteriously. Grandfather Wong and the head of Kitchen Knife sect were quickly approaching the time limit for their battle. Grandfather Wong had pretty much finished studying the recipes in the past few weeks, and he heard that he had been practicing his knife skills recently at the Chrysanthemum restaurant, where he used to work. In the last few days, Grandfather Wong had been going out before dawn every day in order to improve his knife skills. Loopy Toad stood guard at the door and immediately knew what was going on. Wong Ling nodded. Although he had been busy with the midterm exams and was about to be tossed about by the summer camp, he had always been concerned about his grandfather. His grandfather had never once thought of cooling down his passion for cooking, even though he had reached an advanced age. Come to think of it, Wong Ling remembered that when Grandfather Wong was young, he had been a famous chef at Kikaro Restaurant. No one could match his self-created cloak knife technique, and he had won various awards all over the country for his exquisite knife skills. Now, these medals were locked in the old man's house in the countryside. Wong Ling remembered going to see it once when he was very young. It was filled with medals, trophies, and certificates, and they were all genuine immortal gold. When he was young, Wong Ling remembered that someone had persuaded the old man to sell his medals and buy a house in the city. Given the capital he had accumulated when he was young, he could have casually sold one of his medals for a down payment on a house in downtown Shanghai City. But he couldn't do that now, of course. Among all the achievements the old man had made, the most impressive had to be when he had participated in the first international knife nurturing competition at the age of 30. He had once again won an international award with his cloak knife technique, and had even been given a title. As for what the title was, Wong Ling couldn't remember. It was a story he had heard when he was young. Wong Ling turned to look at Mother Wong telepathically with a puzzled expression. Mother Wong said as she arranged the tableware, You don't remember? When your grandfather participated in the first international knife nurturing competition, he directly won the championship with his knife technique and was given the title, Clear Sky Knife Luo. Wong Ling nodded. Right? That's it. Clear Sky Knife Luo. Chapter 651. Clear Sky Knife Luo. Little Silver felt like he had heard this title somewhere before. It was very familiar. Because Grandfather Wong had been busy improving his knife skills in the last few days, Mother Wong was now in charge of the Wong family's 3 meals a day. Since she had stopped writing and become a housewife, she had actually mastered a lot of life skills. Apart from taking care of family life, she didn't idle around and used all her time to take all kinds of qualification exams. Tonight, Mother Wong was very particular about the side dishes and had carefully planned out the meat and vegetable pairings. The starter dish was a crystal radish, which was an imported ingredient and very expensive. But it just so happened that they were on sale today, so Mother Wong bought 2 of them. She stored one in reserve and sliced the other and stir-fried it with shredded meat. Mother Wong named this dish Stir-Fried Radish King. The meat dish was vegetable meatballs, also known as vegetarian lion's head, which were made from minced broccoli and diced meat mixed with a certain proportion of eggs and flour. Actually, the main ingredient for this dish wasn't broccoli, but the Wong family now had so much broccoli that they couldn't digest it. So every time Mother Wong went out, she would bring several bags of broccoli with her to give away. Although the vegetable dish had been replaced with broccoli, which caused the original lion's head to lose its elasticity, that didn't stop Wong Ling from liking it very much. But because it was more troublesome to prepare, Mother Wong generally only cooked it when there were guests. This just happened to show that she really liked Little Silver. Oh, that was right. Mother Wong had named this dish Vegetarian Lion's Head. Of the remaining 2 dishes, one was Wong Ming's favorite star grouper, but unfortunately he wasn't here today. The other dish was the soup for the evening, mushroom soup. It was made with a type of imported sea bacteria and Sarracenia bacteria, which were very good for intestinal health. Miss Silver is so thin. Eat more. If it's not enough, there's more in the pot. Mother Wong smiled at Little Silver as she scooped rice into her bowl. He lowered his head shyly. It's enough. I actually don't eat much. Wong Ling and Loopy Toad gave him disdainful looks. I've never seen such a shameless Silver. Little Silver picked up his bowl and chopsticks, and only when he saw Wong Ling pick up food did he dare move. Then where's Senior Wong? Master's father. Little Silver remembered that he had only been to the Wong family's small villa a few times and had very few opportunities to meet him. He's busy composing. Let's eat first. He's always been like this. Mother Wong smiled helplessly. I'll send food up later. Looking at the second floor, Little Silver couldn't hold back his chatterbox. What book did Senior Wong write? I can see. The live streaming life of the Immortal King is serialized online, and the previous one was called Let Go of That Wet Nurse, Loopy Toad replied. You can find it online, but remember to subscribe to the original version. Of course, Little Silver replied solemnly. Little Silver silently memorized the names of these 2 books. These were Senior Wong's masterpieces. He definitely had to read them. Not only did he have to look, but he also had to jot down the key points in his notebook. Little Silver suddenly remembered that when he was at Grenade Throwing's house, he would see Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal reading a novel when he had nothing to do, and studying it as he read it. Little Silver now completely understood. It turned out that he was reading Senior Wong's novel. Master was already so awesome, then how strong was Senior Wong? There had to be something in this novel. In the evening, it was Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal who had specially come to the Wong family's small villa to pick up Little Silver. Because he was afraid that Little Silver would be arrested and taken to the police station if he went home alone, it could be said that Grenade Throwing had gone to great lengths on the way home. Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal saw that Little Silver actually wasn't watching TV or online soap operas, but was instead reading an e-book very seriously, and he was startled on the spot. What are you reading? So serious. Senior Wong's masterpiece. You've been reading it the whole time, right? If you have any notes, can I borrow them to copy? Little Silver looked at Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal. Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal broke out in a sweat. I don't have any notes, it's just some of my own speculations. Senior Wong's book is a little profound, and I haven't fully grasped it yet. If you're interested, we can study it together. For Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal, this would definitely be difficult. Tens of millions of people chased after Senior Wong's novels. Just a casual call to the monthly votes list would result in an overwhelming victory. So many people were reading it, but how many of them could truly comprehend it? Until now, it was likely that no one had managed to decipher anything from the novels, so it definitely wouldn't be that easy for people to comprehend. The so-called heavenly Tao's profound mysteries still needed to be carefully examined. In the past, it might take more than 100 years of continuous research to decipher the profound meaning of a spell scroll. Senior Wang's new book had only been serialized for a few months now. How could it be so easy to comprehend it? Little Silver thought for a bit and frowned. Grenade throwing, I think we're still missing a step. That's why we can't comprehend what Senior Wang wrote. Grenade throwing Senior Immortal thought this was a little interesting. For example, I think we're still lacking practice. Little Silver closed his phone. Although he had only read the opening chapter of the novel, he was already beyond excited and had a strong urge to write. Little Silver had been wondering before whether there was any way he could earn money at home without going out. Little Silver had looked online for a long time, but most of the job listings for part-time typists online were actually scammers. After living at Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's place for so long, Little Silver felt that he should also learn to be self-reliant. And just now, Little Silver felt that Senior Wang had given him a lot of inspiration. Grenade throwing. Little Silver stared at Grenade throwing Senior Immortal with a serious expression on his face. Grenade throwing Senior Immortal. Little Silver, I want to write a novel. Grenade throwing Senior Immortal. That night, Little Silver already couldn't hold back his desire to write, and he quickly wrote the opening chapter according to the novel's format. Grenade throwing Senior Immortal sat next to Little Silver and waited, wanting to see what on earth this guy could come up with. Little Silver. Grenade throwing. What do you think of this opening chapter? Grenade throwing Senior Immortal. What's the theme? Little Silver was full of confidence. It's a story based on Senior Wang's image as a writer, and tells the story of a great godly writer who, after falling into desolation, makes a comeback. Grenade throwing Senior Immortal glanced at the screen. Little Silver's novel opened like this. Average subscriptions, 30. The youngster's face was expressionless as he gazed at the number of favorites displayed in the background. There was a hint of a self-deprecating sneer on his lips, and he clenched his fists so tightly that his slightly sharp fingernails dug into his palms. Wang Situ, average subscriptions 30, flop author 3rd Dan. In the author's group, and looked at the background data and announced it in an indifferent tone. As soon as the S words came out, there was no surprise that it caused a stir in the group. Average subscriptions, 30? As I expected, this trash author is a flop. This good-for-nothing really disgraces us authors. If it wasn't for the fact that he is his friend, this kind of good-for-nothing would have been kicked out of the website long ago. Elsewhere in the yield department, they sighed deeply after announcing the news. Next to him, they patted him on the shoulder. 2 years ago, he still had an average subscriptions of 5,000. 2 years, instead of advancing, he's regressing. If this goes on, he's going to drop out of flop author 3rd Dan. Little Silver, what do you think? Chapter 652. It was July 23rd, on Sunday, in the 13th week of the semester. It was still the office on the top floor of that high-class office building in the heart of the city. In the lady of the castle's office, the tall and sturdy lord of the castle, who was dressed in a black robe and had a full beard, had unexpectedly arrived in the morning. They were about to receive the most important guest of Mo Immortal Castle, so they had to show the highest hospitality. A cup of milk powder made from 800-year-old spirit rhinoceros milk, plus 2 pieces of rock candy. Seeing that it was almost time for the appointment, the lady of the castle started to brew the milk powder. This 800-year-old spirit rhinoceros milk powder was the Lord's prize collection, and there were only 2 cans in total. The Lord of the castle had one in his house, and the other was stored in the lady of the castle's office, so that he could drink it when he received important guests and when he came in person. My lord, is President by looking for us this time because the information we provided last time was wrong? Is he blaming us? The lady of the castle looked a little flustered. Previously, President Bai had been anxious to find that green fur dog and its owner for revenge. They had provided the green fur dog's coordinates, and he had sent Mr. Liu to test it out. In the end, it had been a silver-haired young man. Our information has always been accurate, and it's impossible for us to be wrong. It's precisely because of this that President Bai is looking for us again this time. Sitting in his boss's chair, the lord of the castle interlocked his fingers and cupped his chin as he said, "As for last time, my venerable self doesn't think our information was wrong, but that the other party was on guard and tampered with it in advance." "This, what do you mean?" The lady of the castle was puzzled. "This subordinate is slow-witted. Please explain, my lord." The lord of the castle's expression darkened. "Our Immortal Castle's soul mark is unique and very secretive, and is an important tool for providing us with a huge amount of information. However, we can't rule out the possibility that an almighty could discover the soul mark and even transfer it without us noticing." The lady of the castle was alarmed. "My lord, are you suspecting that someone transferred the soul mark on that green fur dog?" "I'm afraid so." The lord of the castle nodded his head. "Even so, we can still deduce two things. First, the relationship between that silver-haired young man and that green fur dog is unusual." "My lord, you're absolutely right." The lady nodded. "We've already photographed this silver-haired young man and this green fur dog walking together. But what is the second point that the lord is talking about?" The lord of the castle replied, "The second point is that the owner of this green fur dog definitely isn't an ordinary person. I'm afraid he's an extremely powerful almighty. Being able to transfer our Immortal Castle's soul mark without a trace isn't something an ordinary person can do. As for whether the owner of the dog is the young man in the villa, it still needs to be verified. If he was an extremely powerful figure, the castle lord really couldn't associate such a big figure with a young man. Although the 10 generals dispatched by Immortal Castle had suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of this mysterious and unfathomable youngster, whether or not the other party was the almighty who could transfer the soul mark had actually yet to be verified. From the information that the fort lord currently had, whether it was that green fur dog, that silver-haired young man, that great death-courting senior, and even that young man called Ajwa, whom he had always called the root of all evil, none of them were simple characters. Furthermore, this Ajwa was currently in the limelight. These characters looked complicated, but in fact they were very simple. If everything was attributed to that youngster, then it was very easy to explain. "Have you found anything on that youngster?" Thinking this, the lord of the castle frowned. Previously, they had sent out a number of intelligence agents to investigate the identity of that mysterious youngster, but the responses they had received were all pixelated. "We found a little." The lady nodded. "This time, our intelligence agents started with the people around this youngster and were able to gather information on this family. Then, in a roundabout way, they found a very mysterious place where this youngster often goes to study." "A place to study?" The lord of the castle was blank. Logically speaking, even if this youngster wasn't the same person as that almighty, he shouldn't be too weak. But he had actually gone to study. Sure enough, did outstanding people secretly take remedial classes? Where does this youngster study? Which sect? The lord of the castle couldn't help drinking a mouthful of milk. He also wanted to register for a class later. "Number 60 high school," the lady answered truthfully. Then, with a the lord of the castle directly spat out a mouthful of milk. He was alarmed. Why was it this damn place again? Less than 10 minutes after the lord of the castle and the lady's conversation, President Bai finally showed up. This time, the person next to President Bai wasn't Mr. Liu or Elder Zhuwu, but that sissy-looking Elder Ji Xing. When President Bai showed up, Elder Ji Xing was applying foundation to his face with a powder puff. This time, President Bai had come to ask for specific information on that youngster. When the lord of the castle learned from the lady in advance that this youngster was a student at No. 60 high school, he inexplicably felt a little nervous. In fact, there really weren't many places that the Lord of the Castle could call damn places. While Moa Mortal Castle's intelligence network was outstanding because of its enormous network of spies, there were some places where the network hadn't been set up. For example, Huasho Alliance HQ, the family apartment where Weiji lived, and any place that had anything to do with the 10 founding generals were off-limits for intelligence spies. Just a while ago, the Lord of the Castle had wanted to list number 60 High School as off-limits. That was because this school was too strange. It seemed that all the almighties who had been caught recently had something to do with this school. But the Lord of the Castle never expected that even the youngster whom they had been so painstakingly investigating for so long was actually a student at this high school. Such a valiant youngster was actually studying at a Foundation Establishment high school. The Lord of the Castle couldn't help twitching his lips as he felt like his 3 views had already been shattered. When President Bai entered, he didn't say anything as he found a sofa and sat down. The lady brought the cup of spirit rhino milk over, but the other party didn't even look at it. "Have you prepared the information we asked for?" Next to President Bai, that elder Ji Xing asked. "Since it's President Bai's request, we've naturally prepared it." The Lord of the Castle stretched out his hand, and the lady handed him the prepared information. It was a very small USB flash drive with all the information inside. But the moment he handed over the USB flash drive, the Lord of the Castle hesitated a little. He stared at President Bai and smiled awkwardly. President Bai, are you sure you won't reconsider?" Chapter 653. As an intelligence organization that currently enjoyed a certain reputation in Songhai City and even the world, Immortal Castle had been able to establish a foothold here for so long, and even pulled back from the brink many times when the organization was on the verge of extinction, was inseparable from the customer satisfaction that Immortal Castle had built up over a long period of time. The truth was that it wasn't just the underworld of the cultivation world that bought intelligence from Immortal Castle. There were also legitimate clients. In the end, it was just a competition of who had the highest price. As Immortal Castle's highest level client, President Bai enjoyed lifelong confidentiality, which meant that Immortal Castle wouldn't sell any intelligence on him to outsiders. Similarly, as a partner of this level, apart from the corresponding right to privacy, Immortal Castle also guaranteed his personal safety. Number 60 high. At least in the eyes of the Lord of Immortal Castle, it was a pretty sinister place. There were simply too many big shots who had knelt here. Even those who had survived, like that Taoist Tao Tai, were at the very least the junior brother of that history teacher for number 60 high. Now that the Lord thought about it carefully, he felt that the reason why Taoist Tao Tai had been able to escape unscathed was definitely because he was related to a teacher from number 60 high. However, the Lord of Immortal Castle's kind advice didn't attract the attention of President Bai and that Elder Ji Xing behind him. Elder Ji Xing just accepted the information on behalf of President Bai, then directly inserted the USB into the portable handheld computer he carried with him and started to read it. Number 60 high. Elder Ji Xing felt that this place was a little familiar. It seemed to be a place that had appeared repeatedly in the news recently. President Bai, Elder Ji Xing, I think you should reconsider. The Lord was silent for a moment, then said, "This school is a little sinister, and our Immortal Castle is already prepared to list the entire school as a restricted area. After that, we won't arrange for any intelligence agents to operate around this school anymore." Is it that bad? Elder Ji Xing laughed cruelly. I remember now. That director Zhua, who's in the limelight now, didn't he graduate from this school? It's a small school, but there are a lot of capable people. Yes, apart from this youngster who for some reason is still studying at this Foundation Establishment high school, the teachers in this school aren't ordinary people. The Lord of the Castle stroked his beard and reminded him. Previously, the destruction of the world-class killer organization Shadowstream was inextricably linked to this school. In fact, in this school, there is indeed a pair of epic-ranked killers in the world of assassins. When the Lord said this, President Bai's eyebrows finally twitched slightly. Elder Ji Xing asked curiously, "Are you talking about that Taoist Taodai and gorgeous itinerant?" "That's right," the castle lord answered honestly. After gorgeous itinerant retired, he became a history teacher in this school. A while ago, his junior brother came to our immortal castle to buy information and wanted revenge. Unfortunately, the two of them seem to have reached a compromise in the end. Other than these two assassins, the rest of the teachers in this school, regardless of their realms, are not easy to deal with. At this point, the castle lord sighed inwardly. He really did his best. In fact, there was some slight exaggeration in this, as he deliberately made the teachers of number 60 High seem very mysterious. But the truth was that apart from gorgeous itinerant, number 60 High's headmaster Chun was currently the only one who could be considered an expert among the teachers of number 60 High. This headmaster, Chun, wasn't easy to deal with. All in all, while his description was a little exaggerated, the lord of the castle didn't want his important client to have anything to do with this kind of troublesome place. However, not everyone had the same strong desire to survive as the lord. Apart from the slight twitch of his eyebrows, just now, President Bai didn't seem to care about number 60 High at all. "Ji Xing, I'll leave this school to you." After a brief silence, President Bai gave the order to Elder Ji Xing next to him. "How should I deal with it?" Elder Ji Xing gave a treacherous smile. "Raise it to the ground," President Bai said lightly. "All right." Elder Ji Xing nodded. This wasn't the first time they had done this. It was just that the scope this time was much wider. It was just a foundation establishment high school. Apart from one or two teachers who were more difficult to deal with and that mysterious youngster, it was basically a one-sided massacre. Instead, Elder Ji Xing felt a little excited. When the time came, as long as President Bai used the Wuji umbrella to divide number 60 High School District into an independent space, Elder Ji Xing would be able to sneak into the space and do whatever he wanted. A confident smile appeared on Elder Ji Xing's face. It was a standard smile, with a dagger hidden behind it. "Don't worry, Lord President, I'll definitely handle it beautifully. That good-for-nothings woo is too soft-hearted, but I'm different." The lady was also blank when she saw his expression. "I haven't asked President Bai. Who is this elder?" Ji Xing looked at President Bai, who raised his hand to indicate that Elder Ji Xing could reveal his identity. Elder Ji Xing looked at the lord of the castle. "I forgot to introduce myself to the two of you. My name is Ji Xing, and I am President Bai's #1 weaponsmith. I've been studying on Sun Island all these years, and I only returned to Lord President's side not long ago. When I was studying on Sun Island, some people called me Sonico." "Sun Island?" The lord of the castle narrowed his eyes. He hadn't realized that this Elder Ji Xing was actually an overseas returnee. But when it came to studying on Sun Island, the lord of the castle immediately had some ideas about this Elder Ji Xing, judging from his tight-fitting attire. It was very likely that he had been studying ninjutsu from Sun Island. That place was the size of a pellet to begin with, and for him to specially go there to study, it definitely had something to do with ninjutsu. The lord of the castle smiled slightly. "It seems that Mr. Ji Xing is proficient in ninjutsu. I can't be considered proficient. It's just my own understanding." Elder Ji Xing smiled. "But when it comes to my path of seeking the Dharma, there are too many stories on it. For example, on Sun Island, I once encountered a very powerful baldy who used the one-punch ninjutsu, which almost made me suffer a great loss. The lord of the castle, and the result. Fortunately, I only lost an egg." Elder Ji Xing smiled. "Previously, my alias was actually Sonic." Chapter 654. In a lady of the castle's office, President Bai and Elder Ji Xing had already left after obtaining the documents they wanted. The lord of the castle's fingers were crossed as he stared ahead with a profound gaze, still feeling very sorry for President Bai's decision to attack number 60 High. The lady would never forget this solemn expression for the rest of her life. In her memory, Immortal Castle had been on the verge of collapse several times, but the Lord had never looked as constipated as he did today. In fact, the lady knew very well why the Lord was persuading President Bai. It was because President Bai was currently Immortal Castle's most important source of income and guest. If this guest died, Immortal Castle would have to look for someone else. What do you think President Bai's chances of winning are? The lady looked at the Lord and couldn't help asking. 10%, or even lower. That's scary. The lady was stunned. In her opinion, President Bai's strength was already exceedingly high. Furthermore, this overseas returnee Elder Ji Xing's aura was clearly higher than Mr. Liu's, and he was an out-and-out super expert. For such an expert to slaughter a foundation establishment cultivator, it would be as easy as slaughtering chicken. But the Lord actually didn't think he had the slightest chance of winning in the face of a foundation establishment high school. How little confidence did he have in President Bai and the others for him to make such an assertion? There are times when people have to believe in metaphysics. The Lord was very insightful, and his expression was unperturbed. I didn't believe in metaphysics before, but have you noticed that as long as the information we receive has anything to do with number 60 high, nothing good will come out of it? The lady was blank. Thinking about it carefully, she realized that it was true. The Lord sighed. With Elder Ji Xing's death, President Bai's left and right arms have all been broken, and I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for much longer. Given our current financial situation, we can survive for half a year at most, which is far from enough. We have to look for our next target as soon as possible. The lady had no idea that the Lord was actually already thinking about what to do next. The Lord sighed. Go look through our previous client profiles and see if there are any who currently have a deep cooperative relationship with us. Sell them some information on Elder Ji Xing, the lady. Lord, you mean? What I mean is, you should go and see if there are any crematoria or coffin clients. Sell them information on Elder Ji Xing so that they could prepare in advance. I have a strong feeling that Elder Ji Xing will definitely be in the center of the funeral. But Castle Lord, Demon Hunters Association, is our important cooperative client. We've signed a confidentiality agreement. This confidentiality agreement is only for when one is alive. It doesn't say after one's death. It was a busy Sunday. At home, Wang Ling scrolled through the class group chat, which hadn't been idle for even a moment. According to the excellent gossip spy Dopey Gua, Mother Wan was holding a food tasting event at 4 in the afternoon to invite parents who were free to try her new dishes. The scariest thing was that quite a number of parents actually agreed. The parents didn't know how scary Mother Wan was, but as people who had been through it, no one knew better than the student from number 60 high how scary this kitchen maid was. Mother Wan's fan Bing conned me pretty badly last time. I wonder what she'll come up with this time. Dopey Gua typed in the group with lingering fear. Super Chen laughed through the screen and couldn't help replying. Everyone, do you still remember the Shadow Stream killers who invaded our school last time? Everyone. Super Chun. One of them snuck into the school canteen and was killed by Mother Wan with a spoon. I've been thinking that this might be a quicker way to die. Eating slow food might be even more painful. Everyone, Wang Ling. As the saying went, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge victorious. Elder Ji Xing hadn't thought much of this small foundation establishment high school at first, but recalling the Lord of Immortal Castle's repeated advice, he decided to come to number 60 high to take a look first. Elder Ji Xing had deliberately disguised himself before going out. He looked very feminine, so it was very easy for him to dress up as a woman. Generally speaking, using a woman's image would greatly lower people's vigilance and make it easier to sneak in. Thus, Elder Ji Xing put on a golden wig, a long black dress, and a pair of red high heels as he went out. The wig on his head was very expensive. It was a disguise magic artifact, and not only could he change his hair color at will, he could even adjust its length at will. The most important thing was that the wig was stuck to his scalp the entire time and would blend in with every inch of his scalp, so it wouldn't fall off easily and cause any embarrassment. Elder Ji Xing was very curious about number 60 high. Qingyun Road in Peiyuan District. This was where number 60 High was located. Elder Ji Xing looked up at the sky and noticed that there was a very thick barrier around number 60 High. This school is so run down, but the barrier outside is very thick. Elder Ji Xing couldn't help muttering in his heart. He didn't know that number 60 High's defensive measures had actually already been very good after several enemy attacks. Actually, just 2 months ago, number 60 High didn't even have a decent barrier. Elder Ji Xing had initially wanted to sneak in, but now it looked like he could only break in through the front gate. In the end, when he arrived at number 60 High's front gate, he was greatly disappointed by the scene in front of him. This school was a little small. Not only was it small, its basic facilities weren't very comprehensive. Even through the main gate, he could feel the thick air of history and vicissitudes from this school. Elder Ji Xing didn't want to get close to the dilapidated stone sculpture at the entrance at all. The metal ball on it was covered in rust, the stone platform was covered in moss, and there were even small mushrooms growing on the side. How many germs were on it? Just looking at it, Elder Ji Xing couldn't help shuddering. He was a germaphobe. Elder Ji Xing decided that when they officially charged into the school tomorrow, they would blow up this broken stone sculpture first. He felt that every inch of this cramped school should be cleaned up. Parent, may I ask which teacher you're looking for? Did you report in advance? Old Li, the school guard, had noticed the blonde girl in front of him right away. Elder Ji Xing smiled slightly and changed her tone to that of a sweet and pleasant girl. Sir, it's like this. Just as Elder Ji Xing was about to make up a reason to fool her and then enter number 60 High to take a look, he never thought that the school guard would directly say, Parent, are you here to participate in Mother Wan's food tasting? Food tasting, Elder Ji Xing was blank. Before he could come back to his senses, Old Li directly opened the gate and let him in. Parent, this way, please. Turn right for the canteen. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.